species. And Google CEO claimed that AI will be more transformative to our human species than electricity or fire. I want to give you a warm welcome to our lovely conference, Economics of AI. I'm Madeleine Stottmeyer. I'm a journalist for Die Presse, and I have the pleasure to lead you through this morning. Your host is no other than a powerful woman and somewhat of an economist celebrity, Professor Dr. Monika Köppl-Turyna. And please a warm applause. And Clemens, Wasner co-founder and chairman of AI Austria, and he's an AI expert and has lived many years in Asia and also consulted a lot of firms on AI. Welcome. So I hand over to you. Before I hand over to those two for their opening remarks, I want to invite you all for questions. We have a lot of impactful discussions today, and all these people are ready to answer your questions. So don't hold back. The best way to do this is over Slido, and you will see this. That's probably an AI speaking. And that's the best way to do it. So if you have any questions, just type them while they're speaking, and then we will include them in our discussion accordingly. But you can also raise your hand if you don't want to use technology, of course. So please, Clemens, Monika, warm welcome to you.
So, thank you for being here. We are very excited to have this conference, and I will not spend a lot of time on my opening remarks because we're on a tight schedule, and we have two fascinating long keynotes and two fascinating short keynotes and panels. So I will not keep you waiting longer. I want at this point just to say thank you for having for being here. I want to say thank you to my team which organized this great event, and I want to thank to our sponsors who made it possible. And you have the list here. It's the Austrian Federal Ministry of Finance, Accenture, Microsoft, Deloitte, A1, and the Austrian Central Bank, which luckily gave us money before they ran into financial troubles. So at this point, I will hand over to Clemens. And again, thank you for being here, and I look forward to the great discussions.
Yeah, Monika, thank you very much. Time for my unprepared opening remarks. Yeah, pleasure to be here with all of you today. Maybe a little bit of context. Why are we hosting an event on the economic impact of AI? There's a little bit of a backstory. There always is. Last year, let's say, we have this European umbrella organization named European AI Forum, which has like more than 2,000 institutional members and so on. And twice a year, we host a very large conference with tens of thousands of participants. And just in the summer before last year's event, it was actually a chance encounter. We talked like, what is going on in the economic AI space? Are there any events? And the conclusion was not that much, especially not that many that are accessible to the public, means outside of Davos, for example. So we hosted, actually Monika hosted a panel with Pierre-Alexandre back then during the event last December. It gained by far the most attention of the entire event, and we said, it's a little bit like Forrest Gump after he's running a marathon to the United States and arrives at the West Coast. Yeah, why not run back to the East Coast? So we said, let's do an entire event on that topic, and here we are today. Yeah, I will not waste more time than necessary. Just one or two remarks. The entire event is live streamed. So if you're taking notes and so on, everything can be rewatched later on, both on YouTube and on LinkedIn. And maybe one also important remark for the journalists which reached out to us in the beginning. Each of you will receive a full transcript of all the sessions, plus an AI summary. I cannot guarantee that it will be free of hallucinations. So let's say if Stephen Hawking is interviewed by Henry Ford, that might not be true, but it normally is around 95% accurate with the summary. So without further ado, I wish you a pleasant event, and see you in the coffee break.
A quick raise of hands. Who thinks that Europe is ahead when it comes to technology and AI? Oh, well, no one. Who thinks that Asia is ahead and is the leading force? Okay. Who thinks that this position belongs to the United States? I feel like that's the majority. So to answer that question a little bit more with some data, our next guest will give an interesting insight into who is ahead, who is behind, and there are some surprising aspects of where do the top researchers of AI come from. So I'm very curious to hear the talk from Dr. Pierre-Alexandre Balland. He works as a professional associate professor at Utrecht University and artificial natural intelligence at the Toulouse Institute. So a warm welcome to Professor Balland.
All right, thank you so much for the warm introduction. Thank you, Clemens. Thank you so much, Monika, for the invitation. Last year we had a great time online, and it's always much nicer, to have this live event again. So very happy to be here. Thanks everyone for joining. I'm gonna hydrate a lot during this talk because I have a sore throat, and I heard I'm not the only one. So it's just water. So indeed, thanks for asking. Who is leading? Who is lagging behind? I'm a bit sad to see, I turned my head and I looked around. Nobody answered Europe. Nobody answered Europe. Well, that was the only point I was trying to make in my talk, so thanks for joining. I'm out. No, fortunately, there are great things happening in AI in Europe. This event, of course, but not only this event. And to be honest, there is some truth in what you all acknowledge, that Europe is lagging behind. Yes, we're going to see that. But there are also amazing opportunities ahead. And I'm a bit tired. I spend like half of my life in the US, half of my life in Europe, and a bit in Asia, but that's like just a tiny bit. That's more than 100%, but that's the way we do today. We all work a bit too much. And I'm a bit tired to always hear the same thing about AI. That's the US and China. And then Europe is just completely, more than on the side, just does not exist on the map. And I want to correct that and actually come back at the end of the talk with some kind of an enthusiastic, positive message. So there is a world in 2030 where we can have the US, China, and Europe. There is a window of opportunity if we focus on the right part of AI and if we come together. If we keep having a siloed AI initiative, a French AI, an Australian AI, a German AI, a Spanish AI, we will be basically where the aerospace industry was in the 60s, where European countries were competing with each other and could not compete with the rising, Boeing in the US. We're pretty much at this moment. So it is a really, really, really important time, and I work a lot with Brussels and the European Commission to try to kind of bring together also different initiatives. These initiatives are important. The Austrian AI initiative is important. The French AI is important. The German AI is important. But what's more important is to come together, unite, and scale. And that's the only way we can have, by 2030, a different answer to what we had this morning. So let's get started. I'm not going to spend too much time on that because you know that already. Yes, today, especially if you look at the big tech giants, there are like 7 major companies in AI today, like the big tech companies. On the Chinese side, Alibaba, Baidu, Tencent. On the US side, Microsoft, Amazon, Google, Facebook. Yes, we know that. You all, you didn't raise your hand for Europe, so you all know that. I'm not going to spend too much time on that. When it comes to funding that goes to AI startup, not too hard to guess which country is the country in green. This is the US. You see OpenAI there. You say Databricks, Anthropic. You know these companies. Behind OpenAI, we have Microsoft. Behind Anthropic, we have Google. We know all of that as well. A lot of the funding is going mainly to the US. That's green. Then China in blue. And then we have something a little bit more tiny here, which is EU27 in orange. It's quite tiny. Actually, this rectangle here is Paris. This is Germany here, and it's pretty small. Here we have London. So essentially, right now, today, yes, again, you're right, not much happening. But, and we'll see that in the last part of the talk, not much, but great source of growth and opportunity over there. Not a spoiler, but especially around open source Gen AI, which is really something fundamental. And we need to make sure we don't mess up the AI Act by over-regulating the open source part of AI. When it comes to patents, we have a slightly different picture than looking at startups. Here we have a more bipolar world, kind of equal between the US and China. Still, Europe not doing fantastic. Here it's like EU27 plus the EFTA countries and the UK. And we still have kind of a similar picture in the sense that it's the US, pretty much the US and China. Now, in terms of how it changed over time, and if we kind of look back, and by the way, AI, I mean, I'm pretty sure everyone here knows that, but AI is not a new field. You know, AI is 70 plus year old, so it's actually not such a new technology. It's just basically over the past 10 years that we had very wide implication that we actually see and that AI is being useful. So the first wave of AI was basically marked by recommender systems that we use essentially to filter a lot of information in the world, you know, for like search, recommendation of music, songs, you know, whatever you're reading, which, by the way, is completely non-trivial because you have a machine that filters what you see and what you don't see in the world. So it has major implication also. Who builds that? How? What are the heuristics? Right now, the heuristic is to maximize scrolling time. So there are things to think about, of course. And then the second major AI revolution, which is what we see today, is basically generative AI, the ability to generate content that basically before was only in the realm of humans. And by the way, it's very interesting when you attend AI events because the goalposts of what machines can do keep moving every year, right? I mean, what we talked about last year, you know, is already irrelevant. And what we're going to be talking about today, in 6 months will have changed. So if you look at the, you know, I've been interesting exercise watching AI conference over the past 10 years. And every year, there is this question, what can machine do? What can human do? And that changes every year, right? So it's always interesting to think about it in that sense as well. So if we think about AI over, you know, like kind of a long period of time, since 2004, more or less, in the whole world of AI, you had, it was not on par between the US and Europe, but somehow it was almost comparable, right? I mean, of course, much bigger in the US, but somehow Europe was there in the first wave, let's say, of AI, could have had a chance somehow. And then what you see is that, you know, Europe being like completely squeezed, this is just the amount of patents, but that's an interesting metrics that basically give a good picture of what's happening. And then, of course, China really, you know, rising and having a very positive slope. Japan kind of shrinking as well, and Japan had a bigger impact at the beginning. And essentially now we end up with the US-China world that you all describe, raising your hand. Now, we could talk for a long time about why, and I really believe that why is a big question. And I'm just going to give the usual suspect and some a bit less usual. So one of the usual suspects, actually when I talk with non-economists, people that don't know anything about AI, the first thing is like, oh, it's cultural. You know, Europeans don't like to take risk. You know, not entrepreneurial. Somehow it's true. You know, I teach in the US and in Europe. And in the US, it's very common that students try to convert their research project into basically starting a company. In Europe, much less, like, oh, we just do it for the academic grade and we move on, right? So there is a bit of truth, but I think this is a little bit too much. There are some structural things. We're talking about it with Monika yesterday. You know, basically what's happening is like R&D switched tremendously from being publicly funded to being private funded. Okay, so that's, you know, if you look at the Amazon Industrial Transition Fund, basically how to automate warehouse workers, and Amazon has 1.2 million employees, so that's immense, right? So it's an immense part of the workforce that could be automated. It's more than 1 billion a year, you know, they invest in that. And that's only one part of the AI budget. So yes, money comes from the private sector. We had a big shift that was in the US in the 90s, And where does the money come from behind the private sector? It's very much from VC. And where does it come from VC? Pension fund. And of course, it's much less in Europe than in the US. So we could talk for a very long time also about this, let's say, more financial aspect. And this is important. There are things to fix in that space. Now, something we forget, we tend to forget as well, is that the US was very much specialized on supporting technologies. So here in black, you have you don't see there are lines here that you don't see, but just imagine the lines between the dots. And essentially the size of the dot tells you how strong you are in a specific technology. And what you see here is like the US. Okay, this mic had enough of me. Oh, no, I'm back. And what you see is like before the AI revolution, the US was already very strongly specialized around control, computer technology, IT methods for management, and a lot of different technologies that were very, very strongly related to AI. You see this big mass, these big bubbles basically around AI, and Europe basically did not have this area of supporting specialization. So there were missing technologies already that were complementing AI that really made us in a really bad head start, right? So we had to overcome also some missing complementary technologies and skills, which now we might be a little bit closer. But basically, we were kind of facing a headwind at the beginning. Now, of course, elephant in the room, Europe is a collection of digital markets, okay? And that's a big issue, and that's the first thing we have to really try to think about seriously, how to create this very unified digital market. So if you think about one of the first social networks in the world, actually 2 years before Facebook, came from a place not too far from Vienna, came from Budapest, the international Who is Who, at some point had 4 million Hungarian on the social network, like the equivalent of Facebook, really, 2 years before. So Europe is not lagging in terms of coming up with new innovation, new technology. The problem is like network effect. What happened once Facebook entered the market? Well, you're not limited to only befriend other Hungarians. You can now befriend with someone else, in the US, in France. So what you do, you switch to a technology that, it's like network effects that we all know in economics. But the problem is that network effects in the field of AI, in the field of internet data, are just completely magnified. Meaning you can have a superior technology, but who cares if you don't have enough users? And of course, the same happened in e-commerce platform. We have different e-commerce platforms in Europe. So we came up with these technologies as well, but we could never scale them because we have fragmented digital markets. So that's one big issue. Fragmented digital market and fragmented user data. Yet, the big issue was that it was open to competition. Okay? So one of the issues that China took a policy decision, and it's very hard to know if it was an industrial policy decision or something about culture. But early 2000, China decided basically to put a fence around its internet data. And at the time, basically it prevented a lot of very strong US technology to enter the market, and then they could grow their own champions, while the industry was maturing. Whether it was the smartest industrial policy move ever or chance to prevent, like different culture coming to the country, it's still a big question, but in fact, it appeared that it allowed for the growth of local champions. And everything I'm saying now actually has implication also on what we could do in Europe, to basically fix some of this issue. Now, one of the questions now I want to answer is like, who cares? Who cares? Is that a problem? The fact that we have the US and China dominating the AI world. And I prepared a few minutes, to discuss about that. Why? Because I think it's crazy not to care. But very often, I am with decision makers that ask me this question. They say, yeah, but, we have a good life in Europe. Like, who cares? And is AI really leading to a lot of job creation? At the end of the day, and a lot of our politicians, what they care about is jobs. It's like, who cares? Is it really like leading to a lot of jobs? Like, who cares? And I had to prepare an answer to that question. Just raise your hand if you think it's not that much of a big deal if the AI that will come in the next decade will come either from the US and China. Just raise your hand if you think it's not a big deal. Okay, you all think it's a big deal. So at least you hear from me that this is very common, and also in economics. I won't cite any name. I was in Boston last week discussing with really top economists that you all know, and someone was sitting like this in his office and be like, but really, I mean, who cares? Who cares? Do we really need Europe to... Okay, yes, we should care, but I'm going to say that in 30 seconds instead of 5, because you all already agree. Well, the slide before actually was about, if you care, if you think there is a link between development of AI and safe AI, I mean, you should be in the driving seat. You should not just be like, okay, guys, throw your models and then we'll regulate. No, you should also come up with an alternative that integrates whatever. So you should also be leading in terms of foundation model and products, okay? And you see that in the AI Safety Summit. Looks like people care about AI safety. It looks also that just government, just care about that. If you look at the amount of bills, the executive orders in the US, in October, exactly 1 month ago, the AI Act underway, already since 2017, the next generation AI plan in China, the French AI strategy, and basically the AI strategy of virtually every country in the world. It looks like governments care as well. I also believe that technology equals growth in the long run, and it's really hard to imagine that you will only benefit from AI from a productivity standpoint by adopting. So one of the big questions in the Commission is always, again, who cares if we don't develop these models? What matters is the uptake, is that our company use AI. And I'm always like, no, the lion's share goes to who produce these AI models, not only the productivity gain that you will use because you use a better tool. That is important, absolutely, but that's not where most of your growth and your gains will come in the long run. So again, and I'm just throwing that a little bit at you, just kind of to check the argument. We can discuss the mechanisms behind, and also if you disagree. But essentially, there is a clear relationship between being at the frontier, being the producer of the technology, and growing in the long run. Application of AI. I mean, I do workshop on this thing. We go through hundreds of use cases in AI. We could spend, if I have 2 hours, I'll spend a bit more time on this slide. It's everywhere. Literally, I still have a hard time figuring it out one sector, one industry where AI does not have a completely transformative impact. Okay? It's still hard. If you have one, please raise your hand and tell me, on this, I really don't see how an artificial intelligence could bring productivity gain or transform the business model. I mean, I just don't see it. I just don't see it. In some sectors, it's more a matter of time. It will take longer, but essentially, it's pretty much everywhere. Which also means it's not just developing the foundation model, it's also developing the industry of the future. So having a head start in the production of AI will also be connected to the transformation of this sector. Just think about banking. I cannot say the name of the banks, but 2 large banks, again, last week, and they have 300,000 employees. And then probably we'll talk about later with Fabian. 300,000 employees. And then they were telling me, basically, how do we compete with Apple Pay? Most of our services now, we are an industry that was built for face-to-face interaction. We needed to have offices. Our job and our comparative advantage was to deploy sites where you could have interaction with customer. Now, everything is done literally from a mobile phone. How do I justify 300,000 employees, this payroll? How justify office space, very expensive and all of that? And I mean, obviously, this is going to lead to transformation of industry. Now, the problem is, once you develop and you transform this industry, then you can scale also your products across countries. So the competition is global. Which also means when we think about AI and having a head start in AI, it's also having a head start in basically, transforming almost every industry. Well, that's not enough to convince people that are not convinced. I don't know what to say. And that to me is also another element which is connected to economic geography. It's historically, we used to have what we call a local moat, meaning if my business is to be a restaurant, to be a hairdresser, I'm only competing with other local businesses. And what we see is, with the digitalization and globalization, that you have very strong concentration of production capabilities, but consumption is global. Meaning, we all use ChatGPT. I don't think any one of us hasn't used ChatGPT. If not, then you're in trouble. But all of us use this technology that was produced by very few people, on the other part of the world. Meaning, we're going into a winner-takes-all world where a few people, a few companies can deploy products that's going to be adopted by everyone. So again, no local moat, much less of a local moat. So a much more global competition is happening, and that's going to be true for all the industry we're talking about. It's going to be true also for education, right? There is a very interesting quote, if you're interested, again by Elon Musk. You were citing Elon Musk before, and he was talking about teachers. And it was, in his analogy, it's like, think about the best movie you've ever seen. Okay, I think he used Batman, whatever. Okay, his favorite movie. The best movie you've ever seen. And it's like, the way education is structured is that every local university is trying to replay this movie with local production capabilities. Okay, which means it's like, it's not very professional, not very good. And the future of education will be giant super production, Netflix style, masterclasses, plus AI tutoring that will basically scale at a global level, right? And this is already happening. So universities also will have to reinvent their business model. Now, I'm not going to go too much into that because that's going to be, of course, Fabian is going to be doing a much better job than me. The only point I'm going to say here is that if you look at the composition of countries in terms of jobs and occupation, and the ones that are the most at risk of automation, they're actually the rich countries. They're actually the countries where you see a lot of this job. Junior programmers are in for a very rough time. You can already see that in the data. Soft dev, advertising, paralegal, legal assistant. Anybody that is doing like an assistant kind of job is in trouble. And that's going to be a huge issue. But again, I'm not going to focus on that. But the question is like, where do we find these jobs? Well, these jobs, they tend to be found in the rich countries. Hong Kong, Israel, Sweden, the UK, US, Singapore, the Eurozone. So actually was kind of maybe not something that people were expecting a couple of years ago, but the countries and the regions and the cities the most exposed to automation, they might be actually the one that already have a very high income. Not going to focus on that, sorry. Now, another reason why we should care, and maybe something that it tends to be overlooked, is that, and there's a great paper called Which Humans, published like 2 weeks ago or so, which basically shows that large language models like ChatGPT, Llama 2, Mistral, they tend to be biased toward what they call the weird countries. And the weird countries are Western, educated, industrials, rich, and democratic. So when you talk to ChatGPT, ChatGPT has a way to see the world, like values, that are embedded by reinforcement learning from human feedbacks. What it means is that you have an army of people, an army of humans, that basically tell the model how to behave. Like you will tell to a child, don't do this, don't call this person, a fat person. Don't say that. This is not a proper thing to say. And the internet, which is the source of data, for like large language models, is full of hateful comments and terrible things. So you need to have an army of humans that basically tell the model how to behave. Don't say that. Don't say that. That's not a good thing to say. Now, how do you embed these rules? Which values of the world is it reflecting? And what you see, I don't know if I have a pointer here. I don't think I have one. So try to find it. But somehow in the top between the Netherlands and the US is ChatGPT. How similar is ChatGPT conversation to the conversation you find in other countries? So ChatGPT is super closely related to the Netherlands, the US, basically, again, weird countries, but very, very far from Pakistan, Ethiopia, Myanmar, Indonesia. So, but think about it. If this education model, if we have a world of Netflix-style masterclass, where you pay $30 a month to have, lectures from Elon Musk, from Paul Krugman, Monika, like the star economists, right, in the world, and the star of AI. And you have this super production masterclass where the marginal cost of another student is basically zero. And that diffuses very much. Plus AI tutoring that basically interact with you to make sure you understand what's going on. Imagine this at scale. Again, what are the messages and how are the messages being pushed really matters. So we need alternatives. We cannot have a world where you're going to have one just for the US, one for China. So a lot of reason basically why to care, why we should care. And that's the big data, feedback loop. That's why network effects, just put a square term. All the network effects that in telecom and stuff like that, just put a square term and you got the impact on AI. Why? Because if you have some kind of luck, better marketing, better product, doesn't matter, whatever kind of head start, you get to more customers, users, more data, better algorithm, and just iterate this loop long enough and you get to a space dominated by a winner takes all. And again, it's so easy to churn from ChatGPT to Llama 2 to something else. It's just price and performance that matter, even probably not price that much, like really performance. So once you have a model that does better than anything else, and then you have this kind of feedback loop that gets activated, why would you go for something inferior, right? So we get the same, in the search engine space, 80% of the search are on Google in the Western world. So we have the same kind of effect. Well, what does that mean? Don't start too long, before investing and making sure you have also, okay, now the good news, because so far you'd be like, okay, so I was right, Europe is behind, now you tell me it's important to be ahead, what do we do? Well, I have a great news, I'm not going to sing, that's the first great news. The second one is Europe has an immense amount of time. There is something, there is a base, all hope is not lost, but we have to act and the window of opportunity is closing. So, we have a chance. First of all, these are some of the people that are the most influential in the development of AI today. I think all of them. Maybe Johan, better than me. Clemens the French crowd I tend to know a bit better. There is one I didn't put a name because everybody knows him. It's Yann LeCun. Now, there is a little problem with this. Did you know what's the problem? We have great Europeans developing AI. None of them are working in Europe, right? Meta, San Francisco, Raquel is in Toronto. Jürgen Schmidbucher is still working in Germany. But that's kind of one of the issues. But we have top talent, top European talent. And then that's the good news. I mean, this is really hard to create talent, right? So we have amazing talent. Actually, if you look at the NeurIPS conference, which is known to be top conference in deep learning and essentially AI, and you look at where people graduated. So the ability of a place to produce, this is the top 20% researcher in developing deep learning. Where did they graduate? Okay, undergrad. Okay, where was the undergrad? So the ability to produce skills that matter in AI. Well, this is a very different picture from the first one we looked at, no? The first one, basically, there were no orange in terms of production of technology. Here, it's actually above the US. Okay? And we always say, okay, top institution in the US, and yes, we do have top institution in the US, completely true. But actually, we're not behind, we're actually a little bit ahead, and China is ahead. It's also a matter of size, but to be honest, this is a picture that, I mean, I like this picture, and if we can match that in terms of development of LLMs, in terms of patents, in terms of technology, in terms of products, I'll be happy. But that means we do have the undergrad talent. I mean, this is a really important message to push. We do have the undergrad talent. We just need to make sure it stays in Europe. But we have a base. We have something to work on. India also, India actually, if you look at the brain drain, is insane. India does not appear almost on any picture in terms of production, but the top Indian engineers in ML, they basically go to the US. And if you look at who leads, Silicon Valley companies, you'll see a lot of people that were trained in India, also Iran, quite substantially. Oops, sorry. Now, something important when we talk about AI or any complex technologies, they're not developed in a vacuum. The geography of this technology matters, and they tend to be super concentrated in space. So we should actually not compare countries, European countries, with the US, but the cities. And then the picture also look a bit different when we look at the cities. So this is the same picture as before in terms of the startups. Now, this is, sorry, I don't have the pointer, but you see what I'm trying to show. This is Boston, this is Paris, and this is Shenzhen. And anybody that's been to China knows how, you know, how much Shenzhen is leading. And actually, in China, it's not like almost everything else is Silicon Valley in the US. So it's very concentrated in the US. In China, it tends to be Beijing, Hangzhou, and Shenzhen. But essentially, if you look at the city level, it's, you know, it's not that bad. We're not doing that bad. And some of the European cities are not doing that bad. And that's where our bets should start. We should start betting on the ecosystem that are already having critical mass. They do have critical mass already. So if you look actually at these places, we have Île-de-France, which is Paris, the Munich area, London area, Eindhoven area, in terms of like really critical mass at the global scale. And we have 4 places also doing pretty well that punch above their weight, meaning in relative terms, they tend to be over-specialized in AI. So we have something to start from in terms of, we have like some ecosystem that do have capabilities also to be world-class level and clusters. Now, if we look at Vienna, for instance, and this is a graph that we use quite a lot, and actually that's part of the work with Julia here, who is in the audience. And here, what we look at is also where, in which technologies, regions and cities should invest. And prioritization, making priorities is super important when you invest. And we talked about it yesterday night as well. It's all about making priorities. You cannot invest in any technology. So if you look at the green transition technologies in green and the digital transition technologies in blue, you know, there are already like a lot of technologies that you could decide to invest on. You could decide to put more money in robotics or in electrical vehicles, 5G, IoT, big data. And we need a framework to make this investment decision to basically make an impact and make sure we can develop the lead in a specific technology. So in the case of Vienna, for instance, Vienna is doing pretty well, has pretty good chance to develop some nice AI technologies, mainly come from the large companies located here, not too much the startup ecosystem, but still there are some capabilities. What this axis is telling you is how much supporting technologies and related technologies you have in Vienna. So basically, how likely you are also in the future to lead in this technology. So it is a good news, okay? It is a good news. There are some good things. And the other axis is complexity, and complexity is a driver of growth in the long run, meaning it's a technologies in which you're going to have low competition. It's like building airplanes. So these technologies there are top, but then you have technologies where actually related, you know, industries are very, very absent. 5G, for instance. So I'm not an expert on the Vienna ecosystem, but hopefully it makes sense if you know the Vienna ecosystem. The Île-de-France region will look completely different. The Brittany region will look completely different. Here's more like a good news from the local market of Vienna. Vienna has some potential, apparently, around AI. Now, a bad news, good news, bad news. The European AI ecosystem is not integrated at all. If we look at collaboration between regions in Europe, in blue, these are collaboration between 2 regions within the same country. In green, between 2 regions cross-country. Now, this is not pretty at all. There's way too much blue. My high-level conclusion, too much blue. If you think about it, it is completely insane, nonsense, impossible to predict economically why you have Île-de-France and Rhône-Alpes that basically have 1% of the European collaboration. The 2 biggest clusters of AI in Europe, London and Paris. Sorry, so Île-de-France, when I say Île-de-France, is Paris. The 1.01% here. We're going to have to find here the Île-de-France-London, 0.5% here. So the 2 largest, by far, clusters of AI in Europe, and we're talking really big numbers, you will expect them to collaborate a lot. You will expect like an immense bridge between them, which is something that you see in the US. You do have this immense bridge between San Francisco and New York and Boston and Austin. You see these immense bridges, this big cluster. They connect, they collaborate massively. What we see in Europe is very different. So I'm not sure we can see too much Austria here. Maybe you already have. Basically, this, it's organized, it's hierarchical. This is the UK, for instance. Okay, this is the UK. This is Germany. Like the big square here is Germany. I'm not sure we can see Austria. Here? No. Here. Up here. Yeah, here. Okay. And I have no idea what is Lower Austria. So Lower Austria, the collaboration between Lower Austria and Vienna. There are more collaboration between Lower Austria and Vienna than between Paris and London in AI. Okay. Oh, it's still Vienna. You mean it's? Is it like the same labor market? You would say? But somehow, okay. So it could be the same labor market. Could be part of it. Could be same labor market. It's using NUTS 2 classification, so it should not. But maybe it's actually in practice the same labor market. Could be in some cases. For instance, the Stockholm area, pretty much the labor. I can tell you for sure, Île-de-France, Rhône-Alpes, not the same labor market, and most of them. They're really surprising. And the big issue is this, okay? It's a big issue. So we cannot, the point of the story here is like, we're really in the 60s before having this Airbus moment. This is where we are in AI. It's completely fragmented digital space. It's a fragmented research and innovation space. And there is no way that we're going to have an EU leading AI world if we don't fix that. So a couple of things so you see some positive things, but things to fix as well. Now there is something we're good at in Europe, and that's regulating. Now this is a space of regulation. We collected all AI bills and regulation across the world and put them together. I think there are like 1,000 of them. Well, now you see a lot of orange. So in terms of regulation, we're actually leading the way, which is not, it's not that much of a bad thing. There is a bad joke in the US running in the software world. It's like you have a European, a Chinese, and an American that walk in the bar. The American is like, oh, I'll bring the software. Chinese is like, I'll bring the hardware. And the European is like, I'll bring the regulation. So there is this running joke, which is not true in many levels because China now is bringing both. But there is a little bit of this in the back of the mind of people, and that can be a bad thing. Yes, it can be a bad thing. There are some part of GDPR that hurt startups. Why? Because it creates a barrier of entry. I mean, same old stories of like incumbents trying to over-regulate to prevent entry. Same old story. So regulation can be a strength because people need safe AI, okay, across the world. So people love our, European regulation when it comes to food, when it comes to toys. This regulation is important, can be a source of comparative advantage, or could really push us down to the ground if we do like with GDPR, which, basically we put compliance at a level that only the big techs can survive, and if you're a small company. So we have to take that into account, which, by the way, in a quirky way, the AI Executive Order of October 23 in the US did by putting some kind of weight. They're trying to do like a sandbox kind of regulation, which has good intention. So we need to make sure we do that as well. And this is our source of comparative advantage. This is our window of opportunity. I've never seen such enthusiasm. Like I see now on Twitter, people like, what's going on with, especially with French AI and Paris, what's going on in Paris? Massive round of investment, great AI tech coming around, Meta moving, a lot of research over there, Hugging Face, super French developed, having a lot of collaboration also with Station F, one of the largest AI incubator in the world in Paris, Xavier Niel from Free, which is telecom, also investing massively millions in AI. And essentially what you see is a lot of great work, for instance, Mistral 7B, coming actually from Europe when it comes to open source Gen AI. So again, you can have completely private Gen AI or you can have open source Gen AI. And it looks like we really have a comparative advantage. We have some really superior strengths in Europe when it comes to open source Gen AI. And so basically what we have to do two things. We have to nurture that, invest, push money, go with the momentum, blow behind, and we need to make sure we don't destroy that with regulation. And now we have the AI Act, and we really have to make sure that we regulate with the AI Act products, application, not the research and the foundation models. This is an opportunity to foster open source AI development and increase competition and decentralization. Let's not over-regulate the open source part of Gen AI. It's like trying to regulate a math theorem. Like, let's not do that. Let's nurture it. So invest and don't regulate this part. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your talk. I would like to, if there are, to take two questions right now. I mean, we will have the opportunity later on to discuss some of the aspects a little bit further later on in the panel. But are there immediate questions right now to Professor Balland? Yeah.
You were mentioning that you do not have a moat anymore, but I think when you look to Tesla, the data they own is a big advantage. So you were showing us we do not have this moat anymore.
Actually, we agree with what you just said. We don't have a local moat. A local moat means if I'm a hairdresser here in Vienna, I am not competing with a hairdresser in California. So I have a local moat, even though I might be more expensive and a worse hairdresser. Your example is actually to this point. Tesla, you're going into the wheel of comparative advantage, has millions of vehicles. Like this fleet is just sniffing around, collecting data with sensor and everything. And actually integrating large language model with Grok. Now you're going to have Grok, which is trained on Twitter, together in your Tesla. So you integrate physical and cognitive AI in a crazy way. And the problem is, like, once you have this developed, you don't have a local moat anymore. Because if a local moat somehow in the auto industry could be like shipping cars, which is not, because the costs of shipping are very small, think about the comparative advantage of Tesla. Tesla is not a car company. Tesla has nothing to do with the green transition. Tesla is an AI company. And then Tesla is going to update, with a push of a button, the entire worldwide fleet, which means, again, no local moat. So that actually we agree on that.
I thought the company has a huge moat.
It creates an immense moat for the company, which is the feedback loop part, but not a local moat. But meaning the global competition is it's almost pure and perfect in that space.
And there's one more question from our streamers, from Mario. From a government viewpoint, considering the disruptive nature of AI on the employment market, do we need a machine or AI tax to make up for the loss of human capital?
Repeat.
If we need, it goes a little bit into the next talk. Actually, also it's about an AI tax to make up for the human capital loss. Yeah.
I'm going to answer really shortly because we're running out of time. I'm going to say yes. We have to think about a redistributive system, 100%. And I'm sure we're going to have more opportunities to talk about it. But that really comes closer, I think, to Fabian's talk. But this AI world will create a lot of winners. And a lot of our kids, I think, will be part of this winning generation. But it will also create people that might not gain immediately from this world. and clearly will be replaced from a work standpoint. I mean, I have no doubt about that. So you're going to have a massive concentration of gain in the hands of some people, companies, cities. And that's just not fair. So we're going to have to redistribute wealth somehow, through tax systems, through UBI. We have to think about it. But this is, if we don't do that, we're going to have massive, massive social issues. And happy to develop more in the panel.
Thank you so much for your talk and your input, and I'm happy to prolong that discussion later on. But as you see, one of the first questions revolves around jobs and around human capital. And this is one of the classic prejudices that come to mind when we talk about AI. So I'm happy to hear the next talk of Dr. Fabian Stephany, Assistant Professor of the University of Oxford. As an economist and social data scientist, he investigates how we can create more sustainable jobs via data-driven reskilling in times of technology disruption. And he will address some of those classic prejudices. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks so much for the invitation. Thanks for having me. Thanks, Monika. Thanks, Clemens and Pierre-Alexandre. Merci bien. That was a beautiful segue into this talk, actually. Because we heard a lot about the raw materials that make up us artificial intelligence and that are needed. Regulation is maybe one of them, a European strong point. Data is certainly one of them. Hardware is also one of them. I'd love to talk a bit more about hardware actually later on. But skills are definitely one of the most important raw materials when it comes to technology. The group that I run at the University of Oxford is called the Skill Scale Group, and we're investigating how technology changes the labor market. And people often ask me, like, but why is it not the tech scale group? You know, why is it actually skills? What I'd like to convince you of in this talk is that skills are actually the most fundamental raw material, if you want to say so, for any technology. You need skills, human workers with good skills to create technology, to maintain technology, to develop technology, to apply technology, and eventually to regulate technology. And this is true for any technology, but it's particularly true for this type of technology that we're currently talking about, for artificial intelligence, for generative AI, for large language models. Before I do so, I would like to, in addition of standing in front of a lot of people, put myself in an even more awkward situation and ask you a really awkward question from an economist's point of view. And I'd like to invite you to think of a special skill that you have. I call them superpower skills. There are more scientific terminologies for those. But it's fair to believe that everybody in this room, everybody, has at least one specific skill that they're really good at. This is not necessarily a work-related skill. This could be any type of skill. It could be something you do with your partner, with your kids, with your dog, alone. You can do that at work. You don't have to do it at work. And I'd like to invite you to think of this skill. This skill where you think, like, I'm really good at this. I got this. I've mastered this skill. It could be like doing Sudoku puzzles, speaking in front of people, doing mathematical calculations. Okay, you got the skill, you're at the skill. Now think of the moment when you realize that you've mastered this skill, that you've became really good at doing this. Okay, now comes the really awkward question from the economist's point of view. How did you feel in this moment when you realized, hey, I'm really good at this. I got this. Any one-word feelings? Just to wake up in the morning? Yeah, just shout or raise your hand. I think we don't need a microphone. Yeah.
Should I tell you the skill?
No. How you felt? The feeling?
Oh, I think it's interesting because it's kind of, it's not like one shot. It's as you master it.
Yeah.
It's just, oh yeah, you're doing great.
But what is it? Is it, how does it feel? Enriched? Confident? Yeah. One more feeling? One word feeling? Fulfilled. Okay, proud. Yeah. I've been annoying people with this question for a long time on talks like this and also my friends. The answers are very similar, actually. People feel enriched, they feel confident, they feel that something had shifted, that they are moving beyond what they'd be able to do before. But mostly,
people feel empowered. It's a strong feeling of power. And that is what I'd like to convince you of as well here. Skills, particularly now in our times, in this specific time, today, have become one of the most powerful resources on the labor market. Skills is about empowerment. And this is not only true for us as individuals, it's true for us as a species as well. So anthropologists, evolutionary biologists say that skills, developing complex skills, like painting the caves of Lascaux in France, which is actually done more than 10,000 years ago, and transmitting these skills from generation to generation is what defines us. There is no other animal on this planet that can do this. This is what defines us as a species. But I'm an economist after all, so I'd love to talk about the economics of skills with you. And I'll introduce one terminology. I promise you it's the only economic terminology that I'll be talking about today, but it's a fundamental economic terminology, and that's the premium, skill premium. And that is essentially the reward for your skills. And very simply speaking, I'll excuse myself to fellow economists because it's a huge simplification, but very simply speaking, it's related to the tasks that you can complete. Skills and tasks are related in economics. The more precious the task is that you can complete with your skill, so which means that in market terms, the more people want this task to be completed, and the lower the level of supply, the fewer people that there are on the labor market that can complete this task, the more precious the task becomes, and hence the more precious the skill becomes that allows you to complete this, the higher the skill premium. This is something fundamental to keep in mind for this talk. And this premium is not only necessary in economic premium, in the sense, in the strict economic sense, that it gives you more money. You can go to your boss and says like, hey, I can do this. I can run this database. Nobody else can in the company. I want a raise. It's also increasingly about not so straightforward economic outputs, like flexibility, like being able to bargain, individual bargaining power, something that you often do collectively in the labor market in unions, that people now do individually and say like, my child is sick, I need to take Friday off. I have the bargaining power to demand this because I have the skills that give me this premium. I want more flexible holiday arrangements. I want more flexible work arrangements because I want to work from home for various private commitments. The premium is about this, and the skills, the powerful skills, give you this premium. But here's the thing. We are not alone in completing tasks. Technology also allows us to complete certain tasks, and actually in a very fruitful way, if you think about it in terms of the history of economics. Humans and machines have been working closely together. But there's a point where machines become proficient enough to do a certain task, and also efficient enough, meaning that they are scalable, they cost less money, or the same amount of money for the same period of time in doing a task. The machines take over, like this machine took over. This is a very relevant machine, actually, if you look at the history of economics. This is Arkwright's water frame. Roughly speaking, 200 years ago, bit more, Richard Arkwright, who was an engineer in northern England, came up with this machine. He was an entrepreneur in the weaving industry, and this machine essentially does a very simple thing. You have a wheel here from you on the left-hand side. It's spun by water, and the energy has been used to knit together threads. The threads are coming out of the machine there, and it looks very complicated. It's a big machine, but it does a simple thing, actually. It takes these threads, it reduces the complexity of these individual threads and puts it together to one single thread. So far, so good. Relatively simple, but very efficient. More efficient than the humans that were previously completing this task. And so no surprise that this was a revolution in the weaving industry in the late 1700s, early 1800s. And little surprise how workers reacted to this. This is a famous machine. This is a famous workers' advocate. This is Ned Ludd, who you might know because he's the name giver of the so-called Luddite movement. And these were the first techno-skeptics, if you want to put it like this. These people feared that these machines are too good in what they're doing. They're taking away the jobs. They all be unemployed. He said, like, we come home empty-handed to our wives and kids. The women were not a great deal involved in working back then, unfortunately. We come home to our wives and kids empty-handed. They starve to death. We lose our jobs because of this stupid machine. And some of them were outright violent about their protest. They went to the factories and destroyed these machines because they were scared that they will take away their jobs. They feared that they'd be racing against the machines, and they'd be losing this race, actually. Though the contrary happened. This machine, arguably, was the best thing that could have happened to weavers back then in this industry. There was a parliamentary inquiry about the weaving industry in 1821, I believe, so a couple of decades after this machine had been introduced. And they looked at the impact of this machine, impact assessment, you would call it in policy making these days. You know, what does the technology do to the labor market? And they looked at what happened to the demand for workers in this industry, particularly right at what we heard, at the technology frontier. And back then, I mean, it sounds silly, but the technology frontier was right at this machine, right? After these threats had come together, that was the technology frontier, because that was where the most advanced technology of the time had been applied in the industry. What happened back then? The demand for workers right at the technology frontier had grown over 4 decades by more than 4,000%. Immense growth. And why is that? Let's revisit economics. What did the machine do? The machine was more proficient and efficient than humans. So what happened? Factories got larger, people produced more and more clothes, the price for clothes went down, more and more people were wearing fancy dresses on the streets of London, and people said, like, I want to have this stuff too. Where can I buy this? Arkwright says, like, hey, you can buy this stuff with me, you know, like we're producing this on a mass scale right now. And so they scaled up, the economics of scales kicked in, and more people were actually needed to work at this technology frontier, and so the demand for human work actually grew. This is a very, commonplace almost in economic history. The collaboration of humans and machines. Though this time, they say, this time is going to be different. This time they say, we no longer need people to maintain these machines. These machines, ChatGPT, these algorithms, they can work by themselves, you know. They have their own mechanism of quality control. We don't need people to curate this technology anymore. This technology, if we reach the state, I heard the quote by Elon Musk at the beginning, reach the stage, you know, where AI has become omnipotent, bit of a Elon Musk-ish fantasy maybe, is going to automate itself, is going to improve itself. We don't need humans anymore. And on top of this, it's called ChatGPT. Some economists call it jokingly ChatGPT for a different reason, because it's a general purpose, or it's about to be a general purpose technology, a technology that is all-compassing, penetrating all industries. We saw the beautiful circle. You know, there is not a single sector in the economy that is not going to be, and that's not an exaggeration, going to be revolutionized by this technology. It's not only weaving. And so, no surprise that colleagues of ours predicted, roughly speaking 10 years ago, that in 10 years from now, 50% of the labor force might be at high risk, very high risk, of being automated away by machine learning and robotics. But let's have a closer look at the history, actually. If we look at the history, on this time scale, which is the UK, unfortunately I didn't have data from Austria, we can imagine a time scale that, roughly speaking, starts, you know, where the daughter or the next generation of these machines of Arkwright spinning wheel water frame kicked in, up to the present day. And you can imagine on this time scale various technological revolutions. You have the water frame, you have the conveyor belt, you have the fax machine, the telephone, the computer, the internet. You have first models of machine learning. You have the new generation of large language models of generative AI. But what we see is that employment, but for the periods of turmoil, of political turmoil, of war, employment has remained relatively stable. There were no signs. Whenever workers called that they feared to race with the machines, there was no sign of mass unemployment. We're talking about 50%. You remember this number? 50% of the labor force being unemployed, being at risk of automated away. But I'll give you another 50%. And this is actually no forecasting. This is nowcasting. These are numbers that apply right now. 2 years ago, 50% of European, it's done by Eurostat, by the Commission, of European SMEs, small and medium-sized enterprises, half of them report that they have immense difficulties in finding adequately skilled talent for their ICT roles. And this is not only ICT roles as in the machine learning engineers, you know, the top-notch people that develop artificial intelligence. These are people that work in digital marketing, in digital accounting, for example, that are using, you know, adequately digital skills for working with programs like Salesforce or Tableau, for example. So basic white-collar jobs, if you want to put it like this. And one particular species in this domain, right at the frontier, at the technology frontier, is the so-called data scientist. Or I like to call this group of workers the savvy, so the people that have the knowledge how to work with these technologies. There's been an interesting article by the Harvard Business Review about 10 years ago, where they said, like, the data scientist is going to be the sexiest job of the 21st century. Well, sexy is not really an economic terminology, maybe, but what they meant is that these enjoy huge premia on what they do. Average salary in the San Francisco Bay Area for a data scientist is around $250,000 per year. But that's not the only thing. They enjoy immense flexibility. They have interesting working environments. They work for companies that give them a lot of flexibility on fascinating topics throughout all different domains. And so we wanted to have a closer look. What is it actually about these professions, these newly emerging professions, these people that are now, like the weavers back then, working right at the technology frontier, right where the technology comes in and starts taking over human tasks and potentially starts substituting human skills. Here is data from the United States, where we actually have a look at how these tech-savvy people have been demanded over the labor market. This is labor market demand. It's normalized, roughly speaking, 10 years ago. And while you see that the demand for the average job in the United States is just hovering above, population growth with 11%, you see immense increase for people who know how to apply AI technologies. And by the way, these are not only data scientists, this is AI talent. So these are all people, this is based on job vacancy data, these are all people that are required to some extent work with artificial intelligence. So these could also be people in marketing or in accounting using ChatGPT. This is not necessarily the high-end tech stuff, people developing large language models or neural networks. But there's another interesting thing about these savvy. So usually when it comes to premium, to earning more money on the labor market, it comes to education, right? So that's what we all believe in, and there's good reasons to believe that. The more educated you are, the higher your degree of formal education, for example, if you want to measure it like this, the better your chances are on the labor market. And we had a closer look at this for the example of the UK. This is data stemming from, roughly speaking, 1 million online job vacancies in the United Kingdom. And we looked at the average labor market, and we wanted to revisit the so-called educational gradient. So this means that you earn more money with a bachelor's degree than without, and even more with a master's, and even more with a doctorate. And if you look at the average economy in the UK, this is across all regions and all sectors. That's true, right? You have like a 4% premium for a bachelor's, and 10% for a master's, and 20% for a PhD. So far, so good. The striking thing is, once you look at AI roles, this premium has entirely disappeared. There's no more educational premium if you look at positions where people are asked, and again, I'm not talking about fancy machine learning engineers, they're in there too, but when you look at people that are required to work with artificial intelligence, the educational premium has entirely disappeared. We're still trying to wrap our head around this. There are two assumptions why we think this probably happened. One is, good luck finding somebody with a high degree of formal education in machine learning. Good luck finding a machine learning master's student, graduate, who completed a graduate degree in machine learning, or a PhD in data science. I mean, we at the OII, we've been running a program at Masters in Social Data Science, very smart students, and educating them in machine learning and also social science statistics and big data, using big data. They go out, they work in industry, in machine learning jobs, they also work public and private institutions in governing artificial intelligence, but we've been doing this only for 4 years, and we've been the front runners in doing this. So it's really difficult to find formally well-educated folks. And at the same time, if you see this, if you look at the numbers, how swiftly demand for these jobs has increased, it's also not surprising to see that, because supply just can't keep up. It's just really difficult for people to supply this ever-growing demand on the labor market. And we believe that a lot of employers have switched to something that we call skill-based hiring. So it's no longer the formal education that makes the deal on the labor market. It's really the skills, the individual skills on whether people are able to work with artificial intelligence or not. And we had a closer look at these specific skills. So independent of formal education, we see that specific skills, AI-related skills on the labor market, they enjoy an enormous growth in demand. So they have a growth in labor demand 3 times higher than the average, at least in the data set that we're looking at here in the United Kingdom. But I believe it's pretty similar to many European economies in the United States. For the United States, actually, we know that it's very similar. They have a tremendous salary bonus, up to 60% more for, and that's the thing, the same job. So people working in the same domain, in the same, theoretically speaking, the same office, those that have AI skills compared to those who do not have AI skills. That's a tremendous wage premium. And also the individual premium is very high. It's a 5 times higher premium for skills than on average. And again, I'd like to remind you, when we talk about premium, we're not necessarily only talking about economic premium. We also talk of all sorts of quality premium on the labor market. So for example, what we see is that people who have in-demand skills, they are better in bargaining. They are better in demanding more flexibility. They have more flexible work arrangements. They have a higher chance of having permanent contracts versus temporary contracts. And even if they lose their jobs, having in-demand skills is positively associated to the probability of finding a job again on the labor market. So the premium of skills are tremendous. And these skills, these type of skills, have really become a superpower on the AI-struck labor market. Why is that? We wanted to have a closer look, like what makes AI skills so special? And here, I don't know if there's unfortunately no pointer. I mean, yeah, you already figured this out. The thing is, what we see is that we compared various skills in knowledge work. We looked at, roughly speaking, 1,000 skills, all sorts of skills. This could be accounting, this could be booking a flight, this could be designing a video, this could be editing an audio file, you know, all type of knowledge work that you, white-collar knowledge work that you could imagine. And among these, there were also AI skills. So there were skills like data analytics, there were skills like deep learning, programming with deep learning, knowing how to program in Python, or, for example, knowing how to do natural language processing. And what we find is that the premium of these skills, and this is the added premium in terms of controlling for everything else, so for the experience of the worker, the industry that the worker is in, is tremendously higher, that's the left bar from your side, for AI skills than for any other skill in the data set. And we've been wondering, why is this the case? Well, we found out that there are particular features that AI skills have in contrast to other skills. The first one is, what we see in the top corner, is supply and demand. Their ratio of supply and demand is much higher than for the average skills. They're much more sought after than compared to the number of people that can actually supply the skill on the labor market. But there's also another thing. They have what we call a high degree of complementarity. And I'll invite you to think about a format like this, where we go out afterwards and have a coffee or have a snack and gather together. And there'll be people doing great in networking, and there are those that are a bit shy maybe, and they don't really want to talk to people that much. AI skills are the best networkers, if you want to think about it like this. We never apply skills in isolation. We always apply skills in combination, right? If I tell you, I'll develop natural language processing algorithms, the experts would ask me like, okay, but what's the programming language you're using there? Are you doing this in Python, for example, or are you doing this in Java? So there are always complements, even when it comes to languages. I'll translate from Spanish, yeah, but to which language? To English or to German? So you always had at least 2 or 3 or 4 skills. We had a closer look at how these skills are combined, and we found out that they are combined in various ways, but the striking thing is about AI skills, they are really at the center of these local networks. AI skills are really the skills that have a huge versatility, or complementarity as we call it. They can be combined in a very proficient, in a very efficient way with other skills from various domains in all types of knowledge work. And this leads people who have these premia to gain premia throughout all sectors of the economy. So again, the wage premium, this is again data from the United Kingdom, is not only limited to ICT jobs. It's not only the ICT experts that can gain more money compared to the same counterparts who do not have the AI skills. It's, for example, marketing specialists. So in terms of premium, the gap between the non-AI roles and the AI roles, and we're only talking about skills, a few skills, the premium is biggest for marketing, for example. If you've ever worked in marketing, I don't know if there are people working in marketing or coming from marketing, I guess it's no surprise, because this is one of the domains where data really plays a crucial role. there are few domains in white-collar work these days, in office work, where data has such a crucial role as in marketing, for example. You've been bombarded with tons of customer data where you try to find patterns, who's been buying which product in what combination, does she do it again? And this is exactly the domain of artificial intelligence. This is where artificial intelligence is really great, finding clusters, finding patterns in big data. And no surprise that this is one of the industries where people are really able to massively leverage this. We also see this in more creative jobs. We've been doing a work together with colleagues from the press with Rest of World, a wonderful media outlet that I can highly recommend, where you looked at freelancers, for example, freelancers doing design work. And if you heard the story of how AI has been changing various industries, this is one of the industries, If you think about the people applying artificial intelligence, we see tremendous increases in efficiency, in how long you need for preparing a cover, for example, for a fashion magazine, if you do it the old school way of finding a model, finding a location, going to the location, the model is sick, you need to find another model, you need a photographer, the photographer is late, everything gets delayed, it takes 7 days, it costs thousands of dollars. Or you do with AI, I don't know. I mean, I'll leave it up to you to judge whether you like the left or the right cover more, but there's one thing. I think for many products, the results are or will certainly be indistinguishable, but the economic numbers are far from being indistinguishable. There's a huge efficiency gain when applying these technologies, but it's human people applying these technologies to their jobs. It's really that they have developed the AI skills that are in demand on this labor market. But how do we go from here? We heard that not everybody is equally represented in this AI revolution. And that's also the case here. Not everybody has these AI skills. For some people, it's about finding Wi-Fi connection. It's making sure that the computer doesn't crash twice a day, or having internet to begin. I mean, I'd like to remind you that right now, unfortunately, still half of the world's population does not have access to stable internet connection. And I think we can debate a lot on whether AI is going to change things, but I think we all agree that internet is a basic prerequisite for any type of modern digital technology, be it artificial intelligence or anything else. So how do we move there? How do we help redistributing some of these skills that the savvy have to the other people, to the struggling, for example, to people that are struggling with digital technologies, who are not digitally savvy? Older generations are often named to be among these struggling. I'd like to give you two examples that I found really inspiring that we encountered in our research. One is a big German car manufacturer. I'm not able to tell you the name, but you might guess it's a really big German car manufacturer. And they decided to not let Elon Musk run away and produce electric cars at some point. They woke up and they said, like, okay, we need to produce electric cars. And they told one specific factory in Eastern Germany, you'll be producing electric cars. In 18 months from now, you stop producing diesel entirely and you produce electric cars entirely. There won't be a single car leaving the factory hall that is not electric. Okay, so far so good, challenging. And then they told the person responsible for the education, for the retraining, it's like, and you're not allowed to hire or fire a single individual for doing this. And the cherry on the top will be Angela Merkel is going to come and shake our hands when the first electric car is going to leave the factory. He said, like, okay, yeah, good luck. Long story short, he did manage. But they were very worried, particularly about older employees at the beginning. They thought, like, okay, I mean, I had to learn this. There's not only a lot of technical equipment that you need to change if you move from diesel to electric. They got this all out of the factory, put the new stuff in, but they also needed to change things up here. They needed to do the same thing with the skills, with the brains, with the mindset and the hands of the people working there. And they were worried about older employees, but it turns out that particularly older employees were not the big problem in this case. They came to him and said, like, we went from Trabi to diesel back then with the dysfunctional GDR car, and for those of you who don't know it, we can do this again. It's no problem, you know. We had this structural change once, we can do this again. And educational scientists call this a positive educational feedback effect, a positive educational event. And it turns out to be that, of course, our brains get slower when we get older, but the more important thing when it comes to the ability to learn is that we have these events in the past. So the more learning events we have continuously through our lives, the easier it still remain for us to learn new things. And the example of this big car producer shows this. The other one is our friends from Google. I had on a similar venue like this, a talk afterwards, a very interesting talk with a colleague in the Brussels office of Google, where we spoke about their technology frontier. So like, hey, you guys, you're right at the technology frontier too, right? I mean, you need to keep the wits of your people sharp. You need to keep them skilled. How do you do it? And the interesting thing is, they told me, we introduced something that they call make learning part of working. So 20% of their working time is dedicated to learning. And they actually openly leave this to the employee to learn whatever they want to learn. They could learn Frisbee or free climbing if they wanted to. Of course, not surprisingly, they don't go for Frisbee and free climbing. They go for the skills that they feel in their work environment are the most needed skills. Right at the technology frontier where they are, there might be machine learning engineers who say, like, I always wanted to learn this other programming language. There might also be machine learning engineers who say, like, I always wanted to manage a team. I learned Scrum. I learned team management skills. And then they become team managers. The essential thing is it's happening within the company. And this ensures for those people that they are reskilling according to their needs. But of course, you need a framework for this. And I'd love to conclude with a set of policy recommendations. This is only a small set. But one of them is the question, where do those savvy get their skills from? If they don't learn it in a graduate degree, if they don't learn it in a master's or PhD degree, how do they learn it? What we know from our surveys is they've been learning this increasingly in a fragmented fashion, fragmented educational fashion. This means they learn this via internships. They come to a company, they have basic skills, and they learn the new skills on the job. They learn this often online. They visit courses that you mentioned. They visit a Coursera course, so something, the prime model for what Mr. Musk envisions to happen with AI-fueled learning models in the future. And they learn these things in a very increasingly fragmented fashion. And we need to accredit for this. We need to adjust institutions in the way that we'll accredit for this, that we don't ask people, yeah, but what's your PhD degree in? Like, what's your master's degree in? It's like, no. It's a bit like in the time of the rubber barons back in the United States. Like, people came from Europe and said, like, if you can dig a hole, if you can put train tracks going west, we don't care where you come, whether you come from Germany, Ireland, or France. Like, if you can do it, you can do it. If you prove proficiency, you can do it. One way to prove proficiency for more conservative employees, for example, would be something or an installation of service centers that, like a TOEFL test, like a language test, for example, allow people to condense their fragmented learning experiences, their knowledge of programming language, into a certificate, for example. They would go there, they would sit the test, they would get the certificate, and with the certificate, they can be accredited to people that might matter, that might care more about formal certifications. Another one is definitely following the incentive of companies like Google, making learning part of working. The more we move to the technology frontier, the more human capital actually matters as an input factor. I think we've convincingly have listened to this, or the convincing talk we heard brings this message across. The other resources matter, but human capital matters most. It matters increasingly, particularly for economies that do not have a lot of natural resources, like many countries actually. And the more we think that human capital matters, the more we actually need to accredit this, and the more we need to institutionalize this and give companies the opportunity to do what Google does. Many companies, some companies won't, most of the companies won't be able to do it as extensively as Google does because they don't earn billions with marketing, but then they might need government support for this, because after all, this is not only an investment in the companies, that's an investment in the economy. That's an investment in our society in the end. And I think this mind shift also needs to be brought across. And the last one is one for everybody to take home. Think like a data scientist. The data scientist, who doesn't want to be part of the sexiest profession of the 21st century? But jokes aside, the thing is, I'm not telling you to become data scientists. But what we learned, if we closely look at the research, is that data is a defining factor for working with artificial intelligence. And people need to develop a better understanding of how data actually works. Not for designing machine learning algorithms, but for understanding why the automated marketing software doesn't improve if I just throw in more reports. If the reports are just the same of the old reports and there's no variance in this model, there's no information to be gained from the model. And so you don't need them, you know, garbage in, garbage out. Simple principles of data science might be really beneficial for helping people to develop the skills that we need, that have become the superpower, the most essential resource in this AI revolution on the labor market. I thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much for your talk. Yeah, there is already one question. I mean, I was actually very happy about the Trapi example because I'm born in East Germany and had a lot of experience with the Trapi myself. So that was fun, but also surprising. I wanted to ask you how I still can wrap my head around, you know, the Weaver example. Obviously, the complexity of the skill is not as on the same level as, you know, programming with Python. You know, that's, you know, you probably can learn in a couple of weeks how to manage a weaving machine, but you cannot do that in a couple of weeks with Python or coding or certain AI skills. So is the shift of the labor market and the movement of the labor market a little bit more stiff nowadays?
I'd love to thanks for this question because it gives me the opportunity to bring this across. I can't show you all the results of our papers. I showed you the premium from AI roles and non-AI roles. We also ran this model controlling for the sector and the industry and the type of occupation for various groups of skills. So which skills do they have the highest premium on this? And expert systems are among the front runners when it comes to this. And expert systems really means you are able to work with IBM Watson or ChatGPT in your job. And I think, like you already asked this question, I think everybody has been working with ChatGPT to some extent. So what I'm trying to say is, of course, there is a huge premium on the high-end skills, but there is already significant premium on these relatively accessible skills. I mean, I don't know, I don't want to embark on a discussion whether it's easier to use ChatGPT than knitting a thread of clothes, but I think we all agree it's not that difficult actually to develop a basic understanding on how you can just use, not develop, this technology to improve the efficiency of your work.
So it's more about the usement of AI. This actually comes, you know, there's another question from the audience. What exactly are AI super skills and how and where can you obtain them? I mean, if you can just give some quick examples, that would be really interesting.
Yeah. Well, I mean, just coming back to this, so we see, of course, a premium for the more complex skills, which is not that difficult, you know, because the rules of supply and demand still apply. It's more difficult to learn natural language processing or a programming language than optimizing your accounting or your, if you're a travel planning agent with ChatGPT. But we still see a positive premium for all of these types of skills. And well, acquiring this, I would advise people to follow the road of the people, the savvy that we've met that have not acquired them via formal education, and that is fragmented learning. A lot of people are autodidacts, if you have a close look. They realize that there is an efficiency gain to be leveraged in their industry, in the job that they did, and they realize, like, okay, this new technology is really going to help. Online courses, I'm not going to advertise, you know, for a specific online course, but there are fabulous online courses out there, even for learning more complex AI superpower skills, for learning programming language, for developing a basic understanding of how does a data-driven model work? How does a software like Salesforce really work? And if it gives me some predictions later on, or how does a software like Tableau work? You know, which is really, you know, a very Lego box type of software where you put in a couple of data points and you get a result. These things, you'd be surprised. These things already make a difference if you look at the numbers of labor markets.
That's very interesting. There was a question from the audience here.
Yeah, thank you very much for this fine talk. The question I had regarding comparison between the degrees, you mentioned BSc, MSc, PhD. I would actually say that when you take a mean of it, then there is no difference. That's what you were showing. But if you look at this distribution, then you're going to see on the tail, then you're going to see a huge difference about that how much this actually make difference for the PhD. Because what I see also from your talk, it's also not exactly differentiated how you define an AI expert. Because nowadays, if you are a software developer, you can write a piece of code and you can run a AI considered as an AI expert, but actually in a more, how should I say, a more profound environment, you would not still be considered as an AI expert. So if you look at these kind of skills, the people who develop the algorithm, who originally designed the algorithm, have certainly PhDs.
Yes.
Those who are using it, more of them, we consider them as the AI experts, but they actually are, and that's why also I think intriguingly I personally believe that the reason that a lot of companies are not successful in doing the AI transformation is because they really don't know how to filter this out.
Yeah. I'd like to underline that I've never used the word AI expert when describing this. I'm talking about skills. That's the thing. I'm not talking about specific roles. I'm really talking about skills. I fully agree with you. If you have a close look at the data for the high-end jobs, of course, these are people that to some extent went to university. It's very unlikely to find very advanced deep learning, machine learning engineers, for example, that have not studied to some extent. They might have not have studied machine learning, but they studied engineering, for example. They studied computer science or statistics. But there's a huge part, even if you take these people out, there's a huge share of people that effectively apply AI technologies, have the knowledge, the skills to apply AI technologies, implement them into their workflow, and there you still don't see a big of an educational premium. It's really like these skills are so sought after by companies that they would take people without formal education. I'm not saying that they only take people without formal education. Of course, there are people with high levels of formal education, but what I'm saying is, in addition to these skills, we don't see an education premium anymore.
We see that how we gain human resources for the working enforcement and also the fear of losing job is a big topic. I would like to take the other questions into the panel discussion, if that is okay with you, to keep things moving and so we can have a quick coffee then later on. I thank you so much for your talk and for your introduction, and I'm really happy to continue this conversation then later on. Now our next guest is a general manager of Microsoft Austria, and he gives us an interesting insight in the responsible AI and the future of work also. Hermann Erlach.
Good morning. Good morning from my side. Thank you for the invitation. Thanks for having me. I think there are already a lot of challenges on my side. Yeah, I'm looking forward already to the panel discussion we will have afterwards. On local level, we are not researchers. Yeah, we are not scientific. We are more or less, we are doing projects together with partners. We do have a lot of partners here in Austria. We have ramped up an initiative called Make Tomorrow Possible Today 2 years ago. Yeah, and we are really trying to push more digitalization and more positive sentiment towards AI into the Austrian business environment and society. And I think I do have 10 minutes or 15 minutes or so. Yeah? I could spend more or less hours talking about interesting projects here in Austria, and I will try to focus on that part. Yeah? What we are doing in real projects, what we are seeing, what are our learnings, what do we see when we are doing projects in the area of AI. And you know that AI is such a broad topic. Yeah, there are different flavors of AI. You see in the media that everybody's talking about DEAI, but I think we need to go one level deeper because there are different flavors of AI available. I've talked about projects. We are doing amazing projects in retail. You're really using AI to bring fresher products into the stores. We are reducing the energy we do need in the stores. We are working with manufacturing companies at the moment to optimize production. Yeah, we are doing risk management based on AI with construction companies. Amazing results. And now we are also entering more or less the commodity side of AI. Well, that's a pretty dangerous term, but we are creating the new working environment in different industries using generative AI, using this kind of AI models. And I will talk about some examples afterwards. Responsible innovation, and I do really want to highlight the word responsible innovation because there are a lot of fears involved. I've learned a lot also from my previous speakers. Yeah, I'm still not brainwashed by my company, so I try to approach things from different perspective. And we are having a lot of discussions these days also about responsible AI, but we are also working together with regulators to help them, to support them. And I'm happy to say that our understanding is really that we are leading AI these days, but we are also leading AI in a responsible way. What is this one? What is this? Letterpress printing machine. We've seen a similar machine before. Here we are 1450 more or less. Yeah? Innovation. Different companies approach and different regions approach this new technology in a different way. Some banned that technology, some embraced that technology. One example is the Netherlands. The Netherlands really embraced this new technology, and this brought them into a position where they really had some sort of amazing commercial growth over centuries. Yeah? We've also mentioned that before, that really embracing these new technologies, really going deep there is really beneficial. We are not doing research, but I've already seen a lot of research about the economic impact of AI towards countries. Yeah? Interesting to see also studies for Austria in that area, but I think the amount of the impact would be or will be tremendous. I've seen studies that, for example, they've calculated it for Italy, not Microsoft, plus 18% potential GDP impact of generative AI going forward, yeah, which is amazing. Another example, here you see the New York skyline, and it's not long ago. 1850. What do you see or what do you not see? No skyscrapers. Different reason, yeah, why this was the case. Here, a couple of years later, what changed? Yes. Not the only one, but one of the reasons why they become popular, elevator. And this guy, Mr. Otis, has demonstrated here at the New York World Exposition his safety system, and the safety system was more or less, the elevator was not able to fall down anymore because of this braking system, and I think we need to develop this braking system so that people are not so much afraid anymore in the area of AI. This is really a simplification, yeah, but this is coming also from Gartner. They've used some sort of naming convention that there are two different areas of AI. Everybody these days is talking about game-changing AI, yeah, where you see disruption in different industries, jobs will be endangered. There is also another side of AI, and I will try to cover on that one today. This is so-called everyday AI, yeah. And in 3 years, 2 years, because of the high number of projects in Austria, we will see that this will be commodity. A lot of people are using ChatGPT these days. ChatGPT for us is not really an enterprise solution, it's more a consumer solution, yeah, from a security perspective, from a data protection perspective. So we've developed systems to be enterprise ready in this AI everyday arena. We've also heard that before. I think we need to move away from that, oh, it's so super dangerous. We need to ask ourselves, what does this technology mean for me, for my role? Yeah? How does it affect this technology me in my role as CEO? What does that mean for a controlling guy? What does that mean for a marketing guy? How are jobs changing? We also need to discuss what does that mean for our company, yeah, for our organizations. What do we see here? And of course, it's super important. I can only highlight that one, to approach AI in a positive way from a country perspective. Yeah, and one remark from my side, at the moment in the political discussion in Austria across all parties, I do not see that discussion. Yeah, I do not see this forward-looking discussion. What can we do to be even more competitive in a responsible way? What can we do to be more competitive towards other markets? How can we become the #1 in AI adoption in Europe? Yeah. We've seen that before, and you know all these numbers anyway. Yeah? The speed is amazing. The speed of adoption is amazing. Some of you, the older ones, might know Knight Rider. Who knows Knight Rider? Yeah. I'm always using this simple example because what has really changed is we are now able to communicate with machines and with software, with natural language. And this might be the biggest game changer, and this is more or less what Michael Knight did with his car. Yeah, there was also some sort of dangerous version of a kit. Yeah, there also a black one, but in the end, always the good one really won. Yeah, so that is also super good. We've also seen that we are discussing these days the combination of human skills and machine skills. Yeah? And what is super important for us, and it's not only a marketing slogan, people need to stay in the driver's seat. Yeah? They are the pilots. So we are only using technology in our products to support people, not to take over responsibility. Yeah? It's some sort of tool, you will see it afterwards. It is definitely here to help people, not to replace people. But yes, people are becoming more efficient, people are becoming more creative. I think in 2 or 3 years in the future, we will look back and we'll say it's just normal to work with these tools. By the way, empathy is getting even more important in the new world. Yeah, we already see that in companies. So what can you do with this technology? Different kind of areas, content generation, summarizing things, code generation. We are developing 60% of our code internally at Microsoft by using these copilots already. Yeah. By the way, developers are super, super happy. Yeah. They like to work with that one because they really want to avoid the boring stuff. And there's a lot to do in the area of search. Also here we have a lot of projects with customers. You can now search with using natural language, and it's super powerful because we see, and you all will see that in your roles, you're searching more and more every day. Yes, in some roles, search time is up to 3 hours a day, where you're only searching. Yeah. One video. Normally, I'm not showing this kind of commercials in Keynote, yeah, but I wanted to give you a flavor of what this is all about, and you will see these copilots coming in more or less all software products, not only the products from Microsoft. Yeah, you will see that functionality more or less enterprise ChatGPT functionality, language models in all software packages that are coming out of the cloud. 87% of organizations believe that AI will give them definitely some sort of advantage going forward. This is from MIT research. And we've already seen that also in the previous keynote that more or less every single industry will be affected. Yeah? And every single industry needs to discuss what might be the potential impact, also the opportunity for this industry by using AI. What is amazing, we have a lot of projects here in Austria, pilot projects. These products are already generally available. And employees do love it. They love it. They really like it. They like to work with the stuff. There's a lot to learn. Yeah, it's not only about technology. It's about getting new skills, learning how to prompt. But we see that there's a lot of positive sentiment coming from employees these days. They are not so, but when they are using this kind of technology, they are getting rid of these fears immediately. Yeah, they learn how they can use this technology. They are learning every day, and they are super satisfied using the technologies. And of course, we see in some scenarios productivity really going up. Yeah, so you can get rid of the boring stuff, and you can focus more on the creative part of your work. By the way, we've also done first calculations. I think in Austria, we really have this issue of having not enough employees anymore. Yeah, so it can really, really help here to support companies and organizations to stay productive, but also how to deal with that labor shortage. This is one example about the business impact overall, also towards countries when you're using AI. I've already mentioned that one. I think it's super, super important that we are embracing this technology in a positive way. Yeah, in some areas we might have lost the battle against US and China, at least from a platform perspective. You talked about that one. Yeah, at least when we talk about scalable AI. Yeah. What is super important here is the infrastructure behind AI, yeah, and we are investing, of course, big amounts of money in infrastructure, in data center. By the way, also here in Austria, we are building at the moment 3 data centers around Vienna. Here you can see a number for Europe. As mentioned several times, the economic effect of AI in Europe is amazing, yeah, and there's really a call to action to do something here. I think we need to regulate, but we also need to be careful that we are not over-regulating. Yeah? This is also why we are discussing regulations frequently with organizations, also with the EU. 20% economical impact in EU, innovation power is going up. It will strengthen our competitiveness, achieve our sustainability targets. In Austria, we see a lot of projects around sustainability. Digitalization, AI, and sustainability are like twins. Yeah, you can really use this technology to go for amazing sustainability projects. And we are also working, of course, in the area of inclusiveness. One example is there's one Austrian Microsoft partner developing text translation for Gebärdensprache. Yeah? If you're using Gebärdensprache, this partner is automatically generating text out of Gebärdensprache, which is an amazing project in the area of inclusiveness. I have to speed up a little bit. So I've mentioned that some tools are not really enterprise ready. Yeah? What we try to do and what we are doing actually is to integrate AI principles into our product so that they are really transparent, that you have complete accountability in the system, that they are reliable. Privacy and security is super important for us, and we have a special framework in place also for our customers to deal with AI in a safe way. Regulation, yeah. In a couple of months ago, at the podium, somebody mentioned Europe is becoming the Silicon Valley of regulation. Yeah, and we've also heard that before. We're doing a lot in the area of regulation. I think we need to go for regulation. This could clearly also generate an advantage for us as Europeans, but we need to be careful that we are not over-regulating things and that we are also not blocking SMEs, smaller customers, to adopt this kind of innovation. That's super important. Yeah. I think we need to foster an environment that really helps generating an innovative mindset, and the smaller companies, they really will be blocked if we are doing too much regulation. Yeah. Also, let me mention, and I see it internally, I see it at customers. If you think about local regulation, it's really challenging because the speed of innovation is so fast, you know it anyway, yeah, that the regulation, to some extent, deep regulation will always be far behind. this is the call to action. And we've heard it also before. It's a perfect segue to my presentation. Employees using the power of AI will outperform employees that do not have these AI skills. Organizations using the power of AI will outperform organizations without. And countries embracing the power of AI will outperform countries without. Yeah? There's something to do here. Thank you very much. I'm ready to answer your questions.
I have one question maybe that goes, there's a little bit an overlap to the model example we heard in the previous talk, because you talked much about ethics and responsibility. The example of the model gives the impression that AI does replace jobs, but shouldn't ethics be a huge part of using AI this way, especially portraying a person a certain way, etc.? Do you think there is a responsibility there?
There is definitely a responsibility there, yeah. And I also want to mention again the separation of this everyday AI, yeah. Using a co-pilot, for example, for me it's not an ethical challenge at all. Yeah? It's a question of upskilling people. If you go in this game-changing AI, I think there are a lot of ethical questions we need to discuss.
Yeah. Thank you so much for your talk. It was a pleasure that you were here. Thank you so much. Who of you used a chatbot or is already, some, and who was successfully speaking to a chatbot and was actually helped by, some. To be honest, me never. I never had a really good experience with chatbots. But to more insight and some interesting revelations about that topic, I'm happy to introduce to you Alexander Wahler, CEO of Onlim. Onlim is a high-tech startup founded in 2015 as an offspin of the TU Innsbruck, and he will talk a little bit about that interesting fact about chatbots and how successfully it's actually already working.
All right. So, thank you for the introduction. And I will actually talk about conversational AI. This is the latest terms, how chatbots are called now, because there is a big change going on to exactly switch now from chatbots where you had maybe bad experience to a conversational AI experience that will give you access to all your data in natural language. And I used today also here a term that I said, okay, what is the role of linked data? Linked data coming actually from Tim Berners-Lee, the inventor of the World Wide Web. And I'm also quite happy so recently that discussion, what we are using already quite long term, that we say, hey, we have knowledge graphs, we have our knowledge somehow collected in all the data that we linked together, and now we want to get the access in natural language to it. And this is actually what I will show you, how these two worlds of the generative AI and also of the symbolic AI is coming together. Also yesterday I was quite happy here at the Gartner event, and the Emerging Tech Radar, they presented of generative AI exactly presented this as well, that these two worlds are coming together, and I will give you a short insight how it's going to be. So just a couple of words, what Onlim is doing. So we are a conversational AI provider already from the early days. That means we are using this technology exactly as I just described already for a couple of years. We are a spin-off of the University of Innsbruck, so we have a couple of PhDs on board, and also already working with really nice brands, 100 more customers that are using the technology that we are outrolling here. So what is the speed at the moment? I think we heard a lot about ChatGPT. So the speed at the moment is here. That we actually see what they are doing. So I think you have seen, we started 1 year ago. We have now GPT-4. A lot of new things are working here together. And also what was mentioned already by the speakers before, also the other companies are doing it. And it's agnostic at the end. So maybe you want to work with Google, you work with the Aleph Alpha on the large language model. So this doesn't matter. I think this competition is going on. And I think it's a competition that is really rather fast, but what does it mean for the individual brands and the companies actually? And it's the question, are you pilot? Pilot means, are you in the IT sector and are you driving the things? Or are you just looking and say, okay, I wait till others is doing? And I think at the moment also when we have seen the slides before, so what is the efficiency? What is the automation? These are figures. If you don't do it as a company, I think you maybe are not in a very good position rather soon. And also I think we have here 76% of Austrian companies are doing it. We heard yesterday also 15% of the IT budget will be dedicated to AI in 2027. So you see what are the thoughts about people, what is going on here. And in this sense, I think it's something everybody should see about it, how to get the knowledge, what you should do in your company, that you drive it in the right way. So what is the user experience? And here I'm coming back to conversational AI, because why is there a change going on? And also here we have seen, so everybody knows the impact of the internet was because we had a browser at some point in time, so we didn't do to use commands. The iPhone showed us how user experience on a smartphone worked. So everybody, or some of you maybe know the Nokia communicator. It was a kind of really heavy tool, so you couldn't use it anymore. And also, I think quite important is the online portal. So big companies like Booking.com from the travel industry have shown us how e-commerce works. In that sense, it's rather clear because it's a natural access. We are not used to use data with keywords. So this is not something we humans are used to it. So we use data in natural language. We have a question, we want to ask the question, we want to get a precise answer. And exactly precise answer is the way why we need also not only large language models, we have still hallucinations, also we get 90% good results out of it, but 90% are not enough to get facts. If I want to get a number, and I get a number that is not 90%, but is mixed up in a hallucination, and it's wrong, I don't have the facts here. And in that sense, it's quite important that we combine, and I'm quite happy about the global movement also this year, not only because we worked since a couple of years on the technology here as Onlim, but that you now see you have these two technologies in the AI space, the symbolic AI, where you build, and this is the upper part, where you have the edges and nodes, where you build your knowledge, you put in your facts, and on the other hand, you really can do a lot of stuff with the large language models. It's the question answering. It's, of course, also how you generate answer and all the stuff here. And so we have now really technology in our hands that will change a lot of things here so that we really can automate all the stuff that was already presented by the speakers before. So to make it a little bit more concrete, and this is, you see here, we have the knowledge graph. What we can do now, in a couple of minutes, we can take unstructured documents, and from an unstructured document, I can take out information that is relevant. I can validate this information in a supervised way, maybe if the human is in the loop, but I get great knowledge out of it. And then I can really have all the applications that we can build. You can get a great chatbot out of it. You can build actually semantic search, but also you just do document processing and knowledge management, because you have large documents. You have a question related to this document. You can get the question in minutes. And this is actually the technology, I think, that will change here many, many things, how we are working, what we are doing, and also, I think, the impact that it will have actually on the economics. So I tried. You see, I'm used to startup pitches, so I can keep the time here, a little bit over time, but yeah. Final slides here, and this is a slide I used already, I think, 2 years ago. And I still keep it. I think it's more valid than ever. And I like it also. I think 2 great movies here. Some of you maybe will know, Ex Machina and also Her. And I think what you have seen in this movie is exactly how we will behave. So you have actually this conversation, this dialogue, and you can use it either in your daily way, how you work, so just because you want to access information, or you maybe want to do a great analysis. You want a complete task because you do a robot process automation. You need to make decisions on a daily basis, and decisions making means asking questions. You need information, or you just do it for fun because you want to have a nice dialogue. And that's it. This was my short pitch here, and thank you for the invitation.
What I was always wondering, I feel like if you talk about dialogue, do you see that people change the way they ask questions? Because, obviously German is a little bit complex questions. Sometimes we are not sure what we want to ask or how to get to the point of it. And do you think that chatbots are actually raising human beings to come to the point?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And I think it's exactly a behavior. We, from technology point, are quite happy because the worst thing what we can do is handling keywords. And it's the same when I talk in keywords to you, you will maybe ask me if the guy is crazy or why I'm speaking in such a strange way to you. And this is exactly what we learned about ChatGPT now, and also Google did it already for a long time, but many people did not recognize when they give a clear sentence in natural language into Google, they get a better answer than just putting keywords that they learned for a couple of years. And I think people start to give clear questions. Also, people start to get in this prompting area so that you really say, hey, I have this question, I want to give this, and please also give me the answer in a specific way. And this makes a complete different user experience here in the conversational AI, and also how you process data, how you access data. And I think the learning is here, and I think it will, hopefully, the data will be very fast of it.
Thank you so much, Alexander, Wahler. Thank you for your input.
Thank you.
So I definitely have to work on my questions. When I used chatbots, I wasn't never really successful, but it's probably because the chatbots I always use were in Austrian institutions, and usually they have to learn a bit better, I guess. So now we have one more talk before we have a quick coffee break, and I'm happy to introduce to you Florian Turski. He's the State Secretary of Digitalization at the Ministry of Finance. He presented the Europe AI Act and nurtures its implication or implementation, and not a while ago, he made a statement that AI needs to be competent and needs transparency. So I hope that he will.
I'm not Florian Turski, although the spoiler, although the color is correct. Now he unfortunately had to cancel. So.
Oh.
Yeah. On a very short notice.
That's good, so we can have more time for questions. I would have loved to. But I would say we go to the coffee break.
Yes,
then.
I wanted to say, so the bad news is that
the
State Secretary has cancelled. The good news is that we'll have coffee earlier.
Yes, so let's have a coffee break, and then we can go into a deep dive of the discussions. I'm so excited for the discussion because we have a lot of more interesting questions. Thank you so much, and enjoy your coffee.
Thank you very much.
And I really want to welcome you to have your questions either raised by hand or you use Slido. However, we really want a fruitful discussion, and don't hold back with your questions. I know that some of you were, signaling earlier that you wanted to have a question. Please, now's the time where we can really have a deep talk. I want to ask a question right away. I was holding back from Stephany from the stream. She likes the example with the waivers, and it implies that it's never enough, that growth goes on and on. endlessly, and there's a break-even point. Or she wants to know if there is a break-even point. At what point does it no longer make sense to grow, and if there are any studies on that? I mean, maybe before we go into those deeper questions, we want to talk about in this panel about policies, about the regulations, about how we can, catch up to the United States and to China. So, and we want to go into the depth. So, but I start with the question to Stephany. How do you see? Are there studies where you say there is no more growth anymore?
So that's a really big question. I mean, it's a very popular theme these days, particularly in critical left circles. The no growth economy. Actually, it's one of the most frequent questions that I get when I present this example, of how people can now race with the machines. For some folks, apparently it's a bit scary, the idea that they have to race with the machines, but it's actually not at all. I mean, if you think about the folks, so I mean, I've been presenting a lot of quantitative research, but there are also colleagues who are doing this qualitatively. So they speak to workers, all sorts of workers, conventional workers, freelancers, for example, who are very much affected by technology, people working on online platforms, for example, like the design examples. And of course, there is a notion of fear when it comes to change. I mean, it is for us or nervousness maybe. I think it is for us in personal life when things change, like whether we have kids or get married, or
and also the unknown.
Exactly, the unknown. But those who made the shift genuinely feel, this was not only a rhetoric that I used for my talk, genuinely feel empowered. They feel really in charge. So they feel that racing with the machines is actually something really enjoyable. So answering the question whether there will be a no growth or degrowth society is above my pay grade to answer this question. It's a bit too big. Personally, I think I don't see this. I see a lot of worrisome economic repercussions if we were to enter a phase where there would be no growth, actually. And the proposals that have been presented for a no-growth society are not really convincing from my point of view.
Yeah, Monika, can you add?
Can I add? It's probably also above my pay grade, but let me add, I don't understand the point of degrowth. So the question is like, why would we want to grow? It's like, it's obvious, because as GDP is not a perfect measure of quality of human life, it's a very good measure still, because it correlates very strongly with good things about life, such as good education, such as good health systems, such as low children mortality or mothers mortality, and alphabetization and vaccinations. So yes, we want to grow. So the one doubt people have is the environmental impact of growth, obviously, and that's why it always pops out in this context. But then still also here we have enough evidence from world literature showing that the decoupling from GDP and environmental degradation is not only possible, but has been a fact in the developed world for the last 20 years. Austria is maybe a bit slow on the slow side of things, but if you look at Denmark or Sweden, who have been introducing environmental policies way before us, they were able to grow very strongly and still reduce the pollution, and also reduce the pollution even accounting for offshoring of pollution, even accounting for consumption-based. So this is not only possibility, it's a way, obviously it needs some regulation and it needs some tools to be happening. So I don't understand why we won't want to achieve no growth. And there is a very new paper which has been published in, I think it was Science or Nature, one of the two, I don't remember, like a month ago, when the scientists were not economists, and that's an important part, because I think economists understand what it means to not grow. But what we have is always like the people from environmental studies are very skeptical, and then they think it's an option. So those people were not economists, and they published in a like non-economic journal, and they did the scenario of what will happen if we actually stop growing as a world in terms of poverty rates, in terms of mortality rates, and it would be a catastrophe, right? So you can see, and I was really happy to see it coming from non-economists, because it hopefully kind of spreads the news among people who are not trained in economics that this is really not an option.
I mean, maybe as the non-economist in the round, I mean, if you extrapolate this to the very far future, if we don't grow, we will die out. Why is that the case? Because the sun will just, Our sun will stop shining in like 4 or 5 billion years. I mean, this is, let's say, an undisputed fact, maybe not among the flat earthers, but it's pretty much undisputed. So unless I mean, this is like as it is, period. So from there, disputing it is in my way already, it's strange to have this argumentation, but let's say to use a little bit of even more short-term horizon than the sun going out, I think much of this discussion is coming from the perspective, you know, hyper-economic growth, pollution and so on. This is very bad, it just grows, la 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 la. I think what many people here totally leave out of the discussion is that it's not just the numbers that are growing, but also the quality, the safety and the environmental standards. So basically everything that you see nowadays, everything is safer. If you think of the exhaust gas of, let's say, of a combustion engine car, or you brought the example later on with the electric cars, all of this is only possible with growth because the money for R&D has to come from somewhere.
I wanted to ask you actually another question.
Can I just really
okay,
quick,
sure.
I have to hijack this one as well.
Sure.
How do you get economists excited to talk about degrowth? But just two things, you know, and I hear this comment all the time when I give talks as well. Sometimes in rooms where that's the dominant position, so, you know, it makes your work harder. But two things, we should not think about growth as necessarily like increasing our, you know, wasteful consumption pattern and things like that. You can grow and also, you know, be smart about, you know, mobility and waste and things like this. Now, I would go even further. Most of the increase in CO2 emission in the world today comes from fastly growing economy in the global south. You cannot decide from Brussels, from wherever you are, from DC, and regulate in that sense, like, oh, it just stopped growing. No. You could do it maybe at the level of Europe and the US, which indeed see a decoupling anyway, so maybe why, but you could. But like, you will not solve the problem at the global scale. The only way to solve the problem at the global scale is to create new technologies that are carbon neutral, period. So the world looking forward from 2023 to the end of this century will be a world where we're going to create really cheap, super abundant intelligence and really cheap, super abundant energy. These are the two biggest challenges. And actually they are interconnected. And that's the work on the twin transition, how to, and we heard that as well, how to make sure that like the abundance of intelligence supercharge our ability to create clean energy. And that's the only way we're going to get out of the climate crisis, not by being mindful of, you know, just being mindful of the way we consume, and especially not degrowing. Last thing, a recent study came up on scholars that study the degrowth and scholars that do not, in terms of their own pattern of consumption, and there is zero difference. Which even tells you that people that even preach that do not manage to apply that to themselves.
Yeah, it's very interesting. But let's focus the discussion a bit more on what we have to do and what needs to be done. You talked about the network effect. And I was actually puzzled that, you know, cities like Paris and London would not more connect with each other. Why? First of all, why? What problems do you see? Why? What is hindering them to actually collaborate? And how could we actually nurture more collaboration?
I mean, this is a great question. And again, it's our system of innovation in Europe is a bit broken because of this lack of interconnection that you see in China, that you see in the US. And I could start with the usual suspects. Language. I hear that a lot. It's not true in the world of AI, in the world of aerospace. I mean, come on. Like, is that really a limitation? I mean, look, we are here from different countries. I cannot believe this is truly a limitation. One big limitation is a lot of this AI policy, for instance, tend to be done at the national scale, right? And this national scale should have also an international component. So it's a bit like, think about soccer, where, you know, it's an international space, and you cannot just decide to hire your own players that you grow locally. So we have to have this connection as well. And a lot of this AI policy, they tend to have like AI programs where it's like, it will actually fund collaboration between Ile-de-France and Rhône-Alpes, kind of by design, you know, and that's kind of a big issue. And I could go on for a very long time, so I'm going to shorten the answer a bit on specific points. But so one big issue is this policy. Also the way markets are regulated in different way, of course, in different countries. And one big issue is labor mobility in Europe. So in the US, super common to just move from one company to the next. People like change career very, very frequently, but also change cities very frequently. In Europe, much less. So, and again, I'm trying to keep it super short, happy to follow up if needed. But in terms of looking into a clear way to solve this problem, we have a program that to me is one of the most successful European initiatives, and it's called Erasmus. And Erasmus is not something that you're going to be able to evaluate immediately and say, oh, you know, it lead to an additional 20% in patenting activity or startup. No. But what it's creating is a common space where you are from Austria and you move to Poland and you marry someone in France, you know, and you create true Europeans that think about Europe before thinking about their own country. And that's what creates also more mobility, and that will create a more integrated space. So what Europe can do is somehow put people together around the table, set the vision, and create interaction space through Erasmus, through FPs, through joint initiatives that nurture the hubs and connect them.
So the Brexit wasn't really helping with the networking aspect.
No, that didn't work. I agree on that. Didn't really work. Actually, didn't work unexpected because a lot of issue. I mean, with Brexit was immigration, and then it actually increased immigration. So didn't work in any way actually as expected.
Monika, may I just from an Austrian point of view, how does Austria is supporting, or how is the role of Austria in the AI world within the EU? Is it, how are we represented in that scape?
I mean, I think Clemens would be more proficient to answer the question in terms of numbers, but I think the big point is actually have been said is like we should stop thinking about what is the role of Austria in the AI ecosystem. We should start in thinking what is the role of Europe because otherwise we don't have a chance, and definitely not as a 9 million country. I had one more idea towards you because we have another good European institution which has been developed in terms of basically industrial production, which is called IPCEI, the Important Projects of Common European Interest. And we have several of those for microelectronics, for hydrogen, for instance, just to name a few. That could be also a way to go. So what the IPCEIs do is essentially they shut off the internal market mechanisms and they allow for state aid and then they involve international cooperations between countries. And they have been very successful in the past in nurturing the other key technologies we want to play in. So I think one IPCEI for AI would be one way to go. But then again, that's one thing. And the other thing is what Austria is really lacking is why Austria is probably a little bit behind of the curve. It's in terms of financing. We've seen this a little bit, the VC financing, but that's also a thing which we can only solve at the European level because none of the other countries is large enough, maybe except for the UK, which is not there anymore, to be able to finance those things on their own. So we need to start thinking more European in this way by just further integrating the markets, further integrating the financing. We have good institutions to do that on the European level, such as the European Innovation Council, for instance, but they need more money and they need more attention. That would be my answer. And I just don't want to think about this as being an Austrian problem because this was not going to lead us anywhere.
When we talk about venture capital, the past years were booming for startups because money there was a lot of liquidity in the market. That now changed. Is that also a problem to be solved in the future?
Yeah, that's everybody seems to kind of assume that it's a problem that the money is not that cheap anymore, but I don't think it is a problem because what you have in phases of very cheap money, you have a lot of wasted resources, and you get the question a lot. Is like Bitcoin is so energy intensive. Why we wanted that? Cheap money of the ECB was much more energy intensive because we were financing projects which, from the beginning, were not going for success, and if the money is more expensive, then you tend to be more efficient with the money, and it tends to select the better projects. I don't think this is a problem. I think it's actually part of the solution, because part of the problem why some Southern European countries were lacking productivity and growth, because you were able to finance non-growing, non-productive economies, or Italy, by providing them with cheap credit and the so-called zombification process. So I think we actually need quite the opposite in Europe, so that the money is more expensive and it really flows into the more efficient projects. What you Upon the pawn is the question of venture capital financing, which is certainly much less available in Europe than in America, and we have seen this on your graph, and this is a fact, and it's also very disaggregated. So there is basically just a little bit of the European financing. It's got larger with the InvestEU initiative, but it's still like much less of what we need. And you also said it in your keynote. So the big institutional investors, pension funds, that's what we will need in Europe in order to be really able to finance those large things.
Yeah. Clemens, the EU is putting 2.6 billion euros into those projects. Is that enough?
It's like asking, is this black? Yes. No, I mean this is obviously not. No, it's the sad state of affairs, and it also I think shows the big difference in the public sphere and discussion. I mean we are now approaching the middle of the so-called digital decade. This is, let's say, what the von der Leyen administration, when they were fresh in office, said 2020 until 30 will be the digital decade. There will be public-private partnerships, I think around 20 or 25 to bring this, let's say, on the road. And the one for AI data and robotics has the breathtaking amount of 2.6 billion euros. This is like what the boss of the gentleman in the first row of Mr. Erlach. I think Microsoft is spending this every 2 weeks on let's say cloud infrastructure investment and so on. So this is definitely not enough. But I think that the even larger problem in all of this is that the senseful discussion where to put the money, how to create networks and so on is totally overshadowed by the policy debate. And which is, for me, it's difficult to understand if you stand on the outside, but let's say from the internal mechanisms and logic within the European Commission and so on, for them this is just a reflex that you want to make, let's say, customer facing, or let's say consumer protecting regulation. So this is definitely something that needs to change. I expect this actually to be one of the main themes even in the upcoming EU election cycle that will take place next year. And from a gut feeling, I would say what was a big game changer in this type of discussion was the Semiconductor and Chips Act. This sort of opened the Pandora's box. What could be done if the willingness is there, and I think AI will follow in that footsteps. Maybe not on that height and surely with lots of red tape, but I would say the sense of urgency is at least here now.
Do you honestly think that politicians right now are aware of that the policy discussion has to change?
Yeah, behind closed doors they are. And let's say how to say, the big advantage with semiconductors after all is that you can touch them. So when you had first you had the COVID crisis, this was happening, let's say this was especially on the so-called long-tail chip nodes a problem. This is like, let's say the not cutting-edge chips that go into automotive. So most of them come from East Asia. Or let's say even cheaper markets, and they are produced there, they couldn't be transported anymore. Then in the Suez Canal, you had the Evergreen that was blocking it, and people realized, oh, things cannot move anymore from the right side of the map to the middle of the map. We need to produce it within our own borders. For digital, this is of course far harder to grasp, but now I think, as strange as it sounds, I think ChatGPT has a very big impact here because it makes it more tangible for everybody. You have 150 million users around the world, and now even the politicians, or let's say the high-level bureaucrats in the EU, are trying it out and they start to realize. Actually, they're echoing what you mentioned before. This is a problem if more and more of your base technology is going away. You're basically becoming a user. You become like an emerging market and no longer a developed economy.
Yeah. I would like to add in a question to Fabian. When we talk, we saw also in Pierre's presentation that actually the talents are here. Europe has actually a lot of talents, but often they move someplace else where there is obviously a better opportunity, a better networking. Like in your research, is there a part where you see opportunities, how we can actually foster those talents to stay here and actually to yeah, to just, give them an environment that they want to actually create, in the European sector, something sustainable.
So there have been interesting studies on this actually, where you look at how, so you said initially the talent is there and then it goes abroad. So there have been interesting studies on various research grants, not only in the field of AI, and all sorts of scientific endeavors, where they try to decompose, like, where does the knowledge in the end come from? So they look at research teams and how they're composed. And if you only compare the United States and Europe, you see a mass exodus, essentially. Interestingly, that there is more innovation in some fields being produced by European scientists in the United States than by European scientists in Europe, which is really striking. So what do they do right? I mean, in terms of educational policies, one is to go for excellence. I mean, I think we spoke about the UK, for example, and you can politically, of course, very fiercely debate the discussion on whether Brexit was a good idea. I personally don't think, generalistically speaking, that it was a good idea at all. But it gave the UK a lot of wiggle room when it comes to doing things differently. For example, doing things differently when it comes to fostering lighthouse education, excellency in education. I'm not advertising for my home turf here, but if you look at institutions like Oxbridge and similar universities, of course in the US, but I'm trying to make the UK argument because it's just across the channel. It's not a completely different mindset in that regard. You clearly see that they managed to attract talent on a different level. They've gained a momentum. They also have their certain economic effects. Typical scaling and network effects, that you want to go to a place where there are already a lot of great people working in your field. And to reach this momentum, you need to reach a certain size. And Europe, for various reasons, I mean, federal structures are great when it comes to resilience, for example, against shocks, but maybe they might not be that great when it comes to accumulating talent and also the capital, the monetary capital that you need for creating such a hub. So that would definitely be an approach to go for Europe.
Interesting. And also there is also more freedom for the UK in terms of regulation, right? Because the EU is very quickly with certain regulations that are implemented.
I mean, you might have been wondering, you showed the picture of Balland Park, where they deciphered Enigma 80 years ago. You might wonder, why is the Global AI Summit hosted there, in a country that's only contributing a small share to the pie of all the relevant metrics that you showed us. And that is because the UK perceives itself as such, as a leader in developing artificial intelligence. And I mean, when you look at the City of London, they have a good reason to say so, and they have confidence, particularly because they say, like, now we are freed of all these legislations that have been keeping us, from their point of view, keeping us behind, have been slowing us down. But make no mistake, they're not only really good in developing new AI technologies, they're also very good in the entire, better than Europeans, continental Europeans, in the entire so-called supply chain of this, in applying these technologies, in like finding new applications for this, and actually, frankly speaking, also in studying the societal impacts and regulating this technology. So I would be careful to say that Europeans have a headway, are leading in regulation. They have pretty smart regulative ideas as well, actually, in the UK. So please don't get me wrong, I'm not advocating that the Brexit is a role model, but what I'm saying is, like, one should have a close look at what they did with the freedom that they gained in terms of working with developing these technologies as a role model for Europe.
Yeah, sure.
Maybe one thing to add. I actually, when you mentioned that the UK still sees itself as the center, I was reminded of a quote. I forgot who was the British Prime Minister in the 1950s, but it was a fight against the de Gaulle government. And the conclusion was, then the continent will be isolated from the UK. So it was not the other way around. But in terms of regulation, I think you mentioned a very good point, and I think this is it's very important to correct this image in the public. The EU is not the leader in AI regulation at all. They tried to become the first ones in terms of consumer protection with the European AI Act. It's still looking good, but at the end of the day, it's just consumer protection. So it does not delve into the topic of strategic importance. What should be national champions? For this, you would need a security policy. You would need an industrial policy that is not just pork barrel spending, where you, I don't know, allocate agriculture budget of 600 billion per year. This topic, this discussion is not happening, and I see it. I also see it. Let's call it the insincere discussion, because if you look back the last 4 or 5 years, it was always AI needs to be regulated. We don't have big AI players in Europe, so we need to make sure that the big boys just play along and the big girls. Now you have the emergence of local champions, like you have Aleph Alpha in Germany and Mistral in France. So now suddenly these two countries, together with Italy, realize, it might actually be harmful of what we are doing. And 1 minute before 12, they start a big push to completely turn it upside down again, what they were just discussing before. So I would also not take everything at face value, what is communicated. This is very often self-serving, just, let's say, by pretending to serve it for the greater good.
Monika, what in your opinion, what would be the first couple steps to actually give the EU the chance to catch up to the United States and China, on a policy level?
I mean, we had already some ideas. Maybe one thing to add, to follow up of what Fabian said, is that what we're clearly not good at in Europe, or in Austria in particular, is transforming the talent into the applied research and later on to the companies. You also both said it in your talks. So it's one thing is the entrepreneurial spirit, but obviously it's not only about the spirit. You can create institutions which will then foster the spirit. Just yesterday there was a spin-off conference of Hermann and we had the same topic. So what we have is really good research. I mean, it's not excellent as in the UK and the US, I give you that. So the most excellent universities are outside of the EU in Europe, unfortunately. It's the Köppl-Turyna and it's the British universities. But then we have solid research and development, 3.5% of GDP going to research and development in Austria. But then what we struggle is the next part of the supply chain. It's about the entrepreneurial mind, it's about the institutions, about the fact that universities in Austria or in Germany still have hard time understanding that what they do with taxpayers' money could be translated into, founding companies which give back that money to the taxpayers. And that's, I think, where it really needs to be done the most. So it's about financing the later stages. It's about the thinking about that what we need is not only an excellent research, but the next 2 steps. And more integration at the European level. So just a meta answer on my side.
Yeah. Do you want to add, right? Yeah, sure, go ahead.
I agree so much with what has been said, and especially just to push a little bit on last point Monika made, and to your question on what to do, in a very practical way. We could have an hour conversation on that, but in a very practical way, invest in some core centers, but not reproducing the educational system and the research system in France, in Germany, in Austria, but something on the side. And that's actually what France did. The AI policy the AI policy that was launched by President Macron was also decided to set up new centers that are affiliated to universities, but they have their own rules. One of them, we talked about salary, that's a big one. One of the reasons why people also go to the US is also the premium is intense in this field. And what this policy did in France, and Philippe is here, is also part of this institute, is there is really no cap. It's kind of an organization where you want to hire top AI experts and you want to pay them very, very well, you can. You don't have to follow a salarial grid from university system. You can do what you want, which is not always popular with colleagues and even people in general, but that works. And you have complete flexibility in what you want to do. And you also have flexibility in terms of the rules you have in setting up a company, for instance. In a lot of universities, I don't know how it is in Austria, but I know in Netherlands, in other countries in Europe, it's not that easy to set up a company if you're also a university professor. They had this issue in the US, and you had Stanford model versus the UC, University of California model in the 70s. UC did you want to be an entrepreneur or a university professor? Any successful entrepreneur said, then I'm going to be an entrepreneur, because you cannot compete with a UC salary. What Stanford did is please stay, so do whatever you want. And then what they had is they had professors that were successful entrepreneurs as well, and that could carry this over to their students, to other colleagues, and they kept the seed in-house. UC, they're just go away. If you want to be an entrepreneur, you go away. Well, then they changed when they saw that it didn't work. And I feel like we still didn't have this conversation in Europe. In
it's
France,
even forbidden, right, for a lot of professors and lecturers to have a company.
It can be forbidden, and even or considered as something like evil.
Yeah.
So instead of seeing the synergies, and also for students, it's great. I mean, imagine being like being a startup founder and a professor at the same time. I mean, you have like complete, a 360 view of like a specific topic, but you can also bridge basically the real world and the university world. Also for your students, they can find a job more easily, you have connections, you can bring people in your lecture. It's a win-win, and a lot of universities see that as a zero-sum game. And that could easily be changed. It's a choice.
Yeah, Monika, you reached right to the microphone.
I don't think it's forbidden, but it's not incentivized, first of all, because if you've got a tenure clock, then you have a tenure clock, and nobody cares what you're going to do. You just have to publish your papers. And then a lot of universities, I think, have hard time like taking the risk. So they would rather, if there is a technology, they would rather sell the IPs to some established company, which doesn't create any disruptive value, and basically it's disincentivized. And it's just simply the fact that you said that the Stanford had it in the 70s. I don't think Austrian universities had technology transfer offices in a serious way like 10 years ago. Yeah. So we're very much behind the curve.
Yeah. Are there questions already from the audience? Yeah.
A question to the panel professor. So you studied the success of AI, so to say. Do you also study You studied the factors successful, for example, what the skill required and all of that. Did you also study that you could see that the bubble gets so high for AI and then it bursts now? And for example, if as a consultant you go to a company, you tell them, for example, I have a product that runs on AI, they just say, get away from me, something like that. So these are this relatively change in mentality, I think is also being in research is overshadowed. What do you think?
So if I get the question correctly, whether this is a bubble? It's not really appreciated as much as it used to be, like, let's say 5 years ago, 6 years ago, that you have an AI product and then you go and pitch to a company and the company would say, let's look into that. But now at the moment, they just say, we had many of these before and they just don't work and you should actually do something else, for example. Well, the thing is, I think it comes down to the question whether I think there's a general trend or a specific trend. Mm-hmm. I would not make any recommendations. I had a chat with people interested in this specific question over the coffee break. I would not make any recommendations saying, like, you should need to learn this specific programming language. This programming language is a safe haven for you for the next 10 years. You will always have a premium or whatsoever. There are some more safe and some less safe bets, I guess, if you look just at the time series trends. These things don't change overnight, immediately. Like, if you think about it, a programming language like Python, which is arguably one of the most useful or most widely applied programming languages that's used for developing artificial intelligence, it's like a big ship, It's like it can change course, but it takes a while. It doesn't happen overnight, It's lagging to a certain extent, but it can change. So what I'm trying to say here is that I don't really see the risk of a bubble. There might be certain technologies that will no longer be needed or used, or certain products even. I mean, OpenAI was apparently last week on the fringe of making such a transition, perhaps. Certain products that might not be used in a year from now, but they are general trends. And the most general trend is there will always be technological disruptions. There will always be new technologies coming up, and there will always be premium for people who know how to work with these technologies. And the faster this is happening, the more conventional education is going to be outpaced, which is already outpaced right now, and it's very likely that it will be more outpaced in the future if these cycles become faster and faster, and hence there will always be a premium for people knowing how to work with this technology. If this is going to be ChatGPT next year, or generative AI or large language models in 4 years, I can't tell you. Will there be a technology where this mechanism will unfold? Absolutely.
Thank you.
There's an interesting...
Sorry, because it was also, I think it was for all of us. And I'm going to make a complementary point, because I think something super important, and that comes back to the question and will be relevant to the audience. In terms of the AI skill space, we always talk about the hardcore AI skills. Learning to program, and it's how you converse with the machine. is obviously super important. And I work with people that they are like absolute like machine learning beasts. They can scale something that doesn't break, you know. It's like, but there's a big piece here that's missing, and that's the interface. So you have people that understand business problems. You know, they've been running a real estate fund for 20 years. They know the market, they know the trends, they know everything. And then you have people that have these technical skills. They're like coding machines. They can build whatever you want. They can train ML, whatever you want. And there is the in-between. People that can actually translate this real-world business problem into data science solution, and they're missing. I always see that in companies where you have like these IT guys, and then they don't really connect with the business guys. It's like it's two worlds that don't intersect. So what truly is missing, and I think if I would have to give advice to what kind of skills to learn, it's in between. Yeah. It's really this in between, which some business schools are trying to fill this gap. Sloan, sure, in other places, they're starting to fill this gap, but this is still a major gap in the workplace. And when you actually work with companies to develop LLMs, and I'm sure a lot of colleagues from here also have this issue, you realize there is not in real estate, in healthcare, like there is a lot of data, but data is like in different silos. Nobody really knows exactly. You don't have like one single person that can integrate this data. So before we're going to be able to deploy, and I'm sure in all the AI projects you deployed, the biggest issue is have like a nice data structure platform, and then we can build something on top of that. So there's so much work, human work needed here in this interface. And this revolution, we always think about, I want to study machine learning so I can be an engineer at Google or Meta or Microsoft. Well, there's actually a lot of opportunities to do that in traditional, to help these industries to reinvent themselves and actually work from them directly. And I would say the premium is bigger, competition is lower, and this is very much needed. So. It's actually interesting that you said, speaking of Google and Meta, someone is asking how should it be possible for the EU growing their AI innovation if most of base techs like cloud is coming from the US? AI innovation of the EU will have a great dependency on US tech, or will it be slow because of less local high mature tech? So how do you see that? Or maybe Clemens is also a question probably for you.
It's a twofold question. I mean, picking up the topic with the mobility of talent and so on, the research capability is here. The problem is just on a fundamental level. Europe is not equipped to deal with this type of technologies. And what do I mean with that? I mentioned national interest, for example, before. Think of what's going on with the large AI models, or even on a chip level with export restrictions towards China. So this degree of freedom that Fabian just described in terms of the UK, that now outside the European Union, you have more, let's say, this national card level, like Dominic Cummings was always used to say. You need this type of instruments. So I don't know if you call this protectionism or survival instinct. I know, pick your phrase, but at the end of the day, something like this needs to exist, because otherwise you're not even playing the same game. Yeah. And maybe one thing to add, this is not an AI problem, not at all. I'm quite sure if on the topics that, for example, Monika mentioned with the, let's say, instruments we need from financing, let's freeing up talent and so on, we will have exactly the same discussion in 10 years with quantum. Then everybody will say, oh, we had Nobel Prize winners in Austria, and oh my God, what happened? This is just the same. It's rinse and repeat. Think of, I saw 5G on one of the charts. 15 years ago, the let's say, connectivity in your phone was coming very likely from Scandinavia. Now it doesn't. Yeah. This is just same with silicon. AI, I see, especially with initiatives like the one from Macron laid out and with Mistral, that is a good point, but the fundament needs to change, because otherwise I don't think that can be sustainable.
Yeah. I would take one more question before we head to the next panel. Is there another question?
So at the beginning we had the question about the stages of growth and so forth. So my question now is, why do we have so little growth? Eh? I mean, Mr. Balland, in your presentation, you spoke about these books we read 10 years ago, that half of us would be jobless because of machine learning. Yeah? There has been a Nobel laureate saying he sees computers everywhere but in productivity growth, and we have very little productivity growth currently, and we would need it for climate change, building the infrastructure. So why do we have so little productivity growth despite having AI, machine learning, and so forth?
Maybe the non-economist is purely, I'm the least qualified person, but I think I still know the answer. When you think how AI was discussed 12 years ago, because 11 years ago, it all started with cat pictures. That's not a joke, by the way. The Google experiment. And then in a quick succession, you had chatbots, you had image recognition for everything you could imagine, you had the perfect forecasts, and so on and so on and so on. Turns out of this, let's say, technology mix, only 3 of the technologies were really considered as solved in the last decade. This is time series forecasting, this is anomaly detection, this is like, do I have a hacking intrusion, or is someone using a fake credit card for e-commerce? And the third one is computer vision, where, let's say, for quality control of goods and so on, you have 98%. And the technology is readily available on GitHub and so on. You just have to try it out. Text is a very different beast. Text understanding started with the same, let's say, understanding. This will follow in the same footsteps as computer vision. So there was always the saying, text understanding is just 5 years behind of computer vision, because you have more languages and so on. But in the end of the day, it didn't deliver. So I would say a company like you saw before, what Alex presented from Onlim, this is the absolute exception, that you have companies that really turned this into a sustainable business. So long story short, to get these white-collar productivity gains, or let's make it the Microsoft example that's more relatable. In order to really get lots of productivity gains, you need this in the qualitative work that is happening in white-collar productivity, in the same way as quantitative white-collar productivity was boosted by Microsoft Excel. And before large language models, this technology just did not exist, first of all. Second, it was not readily available. Think of open source. Thanks for listening to my TED Talk.
Yeah, Fabian, you wanted to add?
Yeah, I'd love to add to this. So I don't want to get into a fight with Robert Solow, who said this, of course, in 1987. But the productivity gains are visible. I mean, if you think about how the world, so he said this in 1987, I believe, how the world has changed, has grown in population size, has improved in living qualities, not only here, but most tremendously in countries like China and Southeast Asia, for example. This is coming from somewhere, and technology is playing a crucial role actually in this. So the productivity gains are very much visible if you have a closer look.
Yeah, Monika, you want to step in?
Yeah, 2 points on that. I agree with Fabian. So when you show in your graph where the patents are coming for, I have a keynote in which I show a very similar figure, but I don't show the patents, I show just the GDP as a fraction of world GDP, and it kind of looks the same. So I also have it in the similar style with areas. So you have America and Europe, which were pretty much on par for a very long time, and then came China, and it only eaten up the European part pretty much. So that's what happened. It didn't eat up. So there is a productivity gain, it's just unfortunately not here. So that's one point. And the other point I was making already is I think there was a very, very big policy, a mistake done in 2009 at the European Union, where we decided to throw money at the problem. And as I said, and it's a very cynical maybe way of thinking, was that like hungry people are more innovative, and this is kind of the way how you have to look at it, is that the less resources you have, the more efficient you have to be with them, and that's where innovation is coming from. So if you just flood the market with a lot of cheap money, you finance everything, and at the end of the day nothing of that is going to survive. So that's the second point. And the third point is a bit more technical, but that's there has been more productivity gain than we have in the official figures. Because we have a slight problem with measuring the GDP, is that it has a hard time in introducing the number of things which do not have a price. So if you think about your email service, there will be a lot of productivity gain because you send an email instead of a fax, but it does not have a price tag in most applications, so that it's not really perfectly reflected in the GDP figures. So and that's a huge discussion we have in economics about how to measure those things better. And if you account for that, then I would say that there was a more productivity gain than would you come up from the official number.
Thank
Yeah,
you, Monika.
I think you said in your...
I wanted to make 2 points, and you made 3, and 2 of them were the points I wanted to make. Thank you. Thanks for coming.
But what was interesting in your presentation, you said that the gains are going to the producers rather than the users, which is quite interesting. Why, just if I may a little follow-up, why is using AI not also as, attractive to as being the producer?
No, of course, if I sell you a shovel and you want to dig a hole, you're going to be faster than without a shovel, right? So your productivity will go up as a user if you adopt the technology. So it's a point I said, yes, true. So the uptake is important, adoption is important, all of this is important. But the point I was making is that it's the big piece of the cake, the lion's share, what Monika described in point number 1, comes from actually the one that manufacture and sell the shovel.
Yeah.
So that's super important to grow our ability in AI knowledge production, in products, super important. And the reason why I say that to this audience is that way too often do I hear, who cares if we use ChatGPT, it will increase productivity gains also in Europe. Well, we do care, it is important.
Clemens, you want to add?
See, this is the 5th last comment. No, because this is always discussed in such a abstract way. There is a very recent example where this actually happened. If you look at the, let's say, history of semiconductors, I mean, obviously, let's say 99% of it is coming from the United States. Think of Intel, integrated circuit, and so on. Then in the 80s, you had the movement in Japan, where, let's say, Morita-san from Sony, he always said he's the transistor salesman of the United States. So they made originally transistor radios. They went into DRAM production, this means storage, and then afterwards in consumer products. This worked for quite some time, but when you're not master of the, let's say, of the core IP and so on, if there is a shift in the market, you're just blown away completely, because you're higher, let's say, in the value chain, and no one is stopping other regions in the world to start competing with you. Just think how, let's say, the Japanese consumer electronics got totally outsmarted and outrun by the Korean consumer electronics. This could not happen if let's say, your economy is in a more stable footing if you're lower in the value chain, if you really provide these base technologies and you really make the strategic, let's say, setups to make this work. There's a very good book on the topic. It's called The Chip War. It was even the FD Book of the Year last year.
So I hope that there's even a book recommendation at the end, so everyone has something to do then later on. I hand over to Clemens for the next panel. Thank you so much for the discussion. It was so lovely. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Also, thanks a lot for the perfect moderation. I have big shoes to fill. So now, last but not least, we have the final panel discussion of today. The idea behind the panel discussion was we start with policy and macroeconomics, which is, of course, very important. And these are also the topics which more or less dictated the public debate in the last 10 years. Think of 1.5 trillion savings with AI and so on. And now we thought it would be interesting to talk with those people that actually have to deliver these results, either coming from the large consulting side, either coming now from the very large hyperscaler side, and last but not least also from a company that has to show in its quarterly earnings how AI is delivering better results. So with me, I would like to welcome on the stage, ladies first, Ms. Karin MAIR. There she is. Hello. Yeah, managing partner of Deloitte. I know I skipped it. I make the introduction for your company, but Deloitte was one of the first ones that went into Austria, for example, very deep into data and analytics, also inorganically via merchant acquisition. The next is the gentleman directly in front of me, it's Mr. Michael Zettel, country managing director from Accenture. So, and now switching to the company corporate side, Thomas Arnoldner, co-CEO of A1. It's like the largest mobile operator in Austria. And yeah, our keynote speaker from before, Hermann, Mr. Co-pilot, Erlach. Good. Yeah, I mean, this is, let's say, before we had a little bit of a discussion how we would like to tackle this panel. It's now funny because this was actually the outcome of the last questions, inflated expectations. So what I would like to hear from each of you, thinking back, starting from cat pictures or AlphaGo, depends where you're coming from. What, in your opinion, were the biggest misses in terms of expectations so far? So yeah, Siri and Alexa don't count because I think this would be the total fails on the consumer side, which faded out. But from a business perspective, and maybe, yeah, start with the left side, with Michael.
Thanks for the invitation, first of all. Good afternoon, everybody. The biggest miss in AI is that we are not leveraging sufficiently. So we have tons of data. We have tons of potential applications, but we're simply not applying it enough in the business. All of our studies say that we're roughly around 10% of the data that is currently available is actually leveraged. Only 10% of companies are using and applying AI in a way so the business is benefiting. So by far the biggest miss is that we are not using the applications in the extent which is today possible.
Thank you very much. It's how to say, it's a European panel, so we only discussed the questions. We didn't, like in China, also discuss the answers. Now, but there's one important data point to add here, because Google, for example, did a study among the largest retailers, and the study is echoing what you just said, that very little data is in use, and most of the time, if AI projects are started, it's not spent on actually creating more value, but so it's not to create more, to earn more euros, but to save cents. So at the end of the day, it doesn't make that much of a difference. Good. Coming to the next one. What's your take, Thomas?
Thanks, first of all, Clemens and Monika, for having me. It feels kind of awkward being on a panel where there is more competence in the audience, probably on AI, than, and I'm not talking about my fellow panelists, but about myself, than on the panel. Nevertheless, let me give you, let's say, kind of a business-driven view, and a view also driven by some experience which we had also in telco over the past years with great expectations in new technologies, areas where we have been looking for the killer app which did not materialize. And let me also give you a bit more balanced view here, because and this is dangerous for someone who is managing a large business, because it's easy always, you know, to ride publicly the wave of innovation and claim you are, you know, you're doing what everyone else is doing, because then you're never wrong, yeah. But we never ask ourselves how successful we are in the execution. And technological revolutions, they are absolutely not new. Hermann has had a very nice slide showing, you know, the different technological evolutions from the Industrial Revolution, the Agricultural Revolution, which completely changed how the world works. We had in our industry lots of different revolutions. And just think back the last couple of years when we were talking about self-driving cars 1 year, the next year we were talking about a blockchain, crypto. We can throw around a few more in this round, right? And we all have seen quite some disappointments here. And I think that has not so much to do with the way technology works. It has more to do with the way our brain works and media work, because we have small attention spans and we tend to be, let's say, very excited for short term, and then attention fades away and we move on to the next topic. We see this in media, but we also see this in technology. What is interesting, however, is that the underlying pace of research, of innovation, of product development is ongoing. But we will for sure see also in the space of AI lots of disappointment. We have been working, and we also have more competence here in the room than on the panel. Michaela is somewhere here in the back. She has been working, I think, on AI and machine learning in our company for probably 20 years or 15 years. And we have had disappointments. We have areas where it works very well already, right? Chatbots were mentioned before. I think we as an industry have not been particularly successful in, for example, how we design our customer interactions using AI, which is, by the way, a huge potential moving forward.
Thank you very much. Yeah, Karin, do you want to join our self-help group about AI disappointments of the last decade?
Well, first of all, thank you very much for the invitation. And Monika, if you would told me before how big this audience is and that it will be live streamed, I would have said no. But on the other hand, I'm thrilled and excited to participate here, and I pretty much connect with you in regard to being an expert. And I think this is also something which is part of the disappointment and what is missing. I think we need to become a child again. We need to be excited and not, and I think it's also a little bit female, if I don't know it, I'm the one and only with prepared cards. I've read and did and up and down. So I think it's good to be prepared, but also I think it's called open AI. So I think we should be open and curious and open to learn. And my 12-year-old daughter motivated me to be not so retro-back and scared. And I said, I'm scared today because I need to go there. And said, Mom, you're going to do it. So thank you. On the other hand, Professor, you spoke about that there is no ecosystem. And what are the biggest missings? It was like when we, from a consultant perspective, we were working on one client or one industry to support them. But it was not so much international as one might think, because at Deloitte we are 450,000 employees, so that's a huge workforce, but still it's thinking in silos, very local, and not as much as connected as we should. And I think this is one of the big missings, that we do not connect with each other, but pretty much like to hide, protect, and not share. Also sitting here with competitors, there is no competition, but we need to do it together. So the biggest missing is that we nowhere, I think, have established so far open ecosystems and talk openly of what we want to do. And on the other hand, I think risk, being scared, being afraid, always looking what we cannot do, where are the hurdles, are pretty much in the center, especially, I would say, in German-speaking European countries. It varies a little bit, but I think these are the biggest missing. So, and I need to start with myself. Be open and curious to learn more and collaborate more openly. Thank you.
May I have a small follow-up question? Because you mentioned the German-speaking countries and Europe, and Deloitte has 450,000 people. Do you perceive the situation to be different in the United States, for example?
Yes, of course. Only if you would look how early this started on working on this Gen AI thing, where we still are working, as you probably know, as one of our global alliance partners or ecosystem partners, how difficult it is to establish like AI methodology like Copilot because of data privacy issues. We cannot do a couple of, I would say, use cases with client data, because it's not doable. Well, and it's not only the US, but we operate on a global basis. So we would see in China they do it, in the US they do it. And we, first of all, need to find ways how we can do it, although within the given system. I appreciate regulation, and I think it's important, especially when it comes to generative AI. And I'm not a software or a technology expert, because I think a lot of people feel also insecurity because they don't understand it. And as of today, there is no difference between my daughter, she's 12, my mom, she's 75, and I'm 53. And I know this MacGyver thing and all these cars, or come here kid, no. But because it's a consumer good to use ChatGPT. So having said this, I think, yes, there is a difference. Regulations are vital, especially when it comes to really sensitive data, such as healthcare. But I'm not a big fan of, first of all, finding a good reason why things would not work and why there is a problem. So I hope it was not a short answer, but yes, and we have different speeds and different cultures, and this is also part of open, bring all of the arguments together. This is also part of this inclusiveness, and generate something good for the future, maybe. This would be my ambition.
Okay, thank you very much. Regarding the data, the data topic, don't worry, we don't forget the SME participant. Regarding the data topic, there was a very interesting study released by Bitkom. Bitkom is like the German Association for the IT industry, and just when the first iteration or the first draft of the European AI Act was released in April 2021, Bitkom published their study, which showed that in Germany around 70 to 75% of the companies for some time after the release of the GDPR totally stopped working on any data-related project because they were not even sure if they are allowed to use their CRM anymore or their MailChimp, or what about cookie banners and so on. So this led to a total standstill. I think where it is now a bit better is that the companies are starting to realize what the AI Act means, and that many applications are, let's say, happening in manufacturing and so on, where you don't have to care about regulation at all. Think of, let's say, predictive maintenance, think of quality control. So I think in that regard, it's better. The people are a bit more receptive to it, but it's, of course, far from having the best grade. It's barely positive, to use a school allegory.
And it's definitely not agile, and it takes much too long. First of all, bring the right people together, the data specialists, the business people. I really like, this, everyone is needed. Also, like old people, 50% of our workforce is below 30 years old. So, but now it's relevant that I'm here too, because the experience, I know certain industries from the experience, if the generative AI is coming up with weird ideas, so, bringing this all together. But it's so true what you said, but still it takes really, really long. But if it's not the Data Privacy Act, it's any kind of, we might violate any other legislation, so like work law, hocus pocus law, you always find a law to block you and to work hard, not only with legal department, but with compliance, with ethics, with ESG responsible person, supply chain control person. It's too many responsibilities to and laws and regulations to overcome. Once again, I'm not saying regulations are not needed or not important, but we really need to look at it, and we heard it in the initial talks, being a champion of rules and regulations. I really like rules and regulations, I really have to say this, but it's even too much for me. So it's not safe anymore, but scary, because it's like a golden cage, which we're in now, to me.
Thank you very much. I could tell you stories from Japan. We are amateurs in Europe.
But we're younger.
Yeah, true that. Yeah, maybe last but not least, disappointments, but maybe also give it a positive spin. What was a positive surprise, except for the Azure column in your quarterly reports, which is approaching double-digit billion revenues?
It sounds crazy, but I do have good news. Yeah, I'm now more than 20 years in that industry, and talking about Europe and Austria, I've seen a lot of projects, and the good news is normally we are not failing because of going for immature technology, or going for the wrong technology because we are not really adopting front-runner technology very fast, so we are safe on that side. But the majority of projects are failing because of cultural issues, because of regulations, because of not doing the right amount of change management, because of skills of employee, leadership topics, funding. So I'm not so much concerned about technology, I'm more concerned about the right culture in our companies, the right fundings, the right attitude towards front-runner technology. I think this is also changing, because it used to be some sort of pretty good strategy actually to wait if the technology is emerging or not, and to say, okay, let's check out whether it works out in Germany, and then let's go for that kind of technology in Austria, because then we are on the safe side. I think this might not be the case in the AI arena because it's moving too fast.
So this trickle-down effect is not here. Yeah, I think Michael wanted to add something to Karin's statement before.
I wanted to be a bit more bold as we're in a small and private round. I think on the live stream, I think the single biggest regulation that is hindering progress is definitely GDPR. So let's face it that each and every project needs to start sort of with a analysis phase, with a legal phase, where you analyze whether you're how you're not violating GDPR. And that is, for me, the single biggest regulation that is really sort of manifesting this competitive disadvantage towards the rest of the world. And I mean, of course, it has some benefits. So the general concept of empowering the consumer that he's in the ownership of his data is, of course, a good cause. However, good cause and bad implementation is really a big, big problem for the industry, for all of Europe, for the European economy at all. And the implementation of GDPR, again, there's not one implementation, although it's obviously an EU directive, it's still 27 implementations, and those are really, really bad in regard of having a clear scope, what is legally possible and what is not possible. And the data authorities in each of the countries are really making the problem even worse, because they're never sort of giving you some sort of approval that you're allowed to use it in a specific way, but they're always, you know, instead of doing it in a consulting manner as it actually is supposed to be, they are there with big penalties. And this is the main reason why we're so much lagging behind in Europe.
Thank you. Before I hand over the word to Thomas, because you wanted something to add, it's unfortunately not just the GDPR or the European AI Act or the Data Protection Act. This I could go on. There's also the Copyright Directive, which got an update, I think 2 or 3 years ago. This famous Article 13, which is basically saying that you're not even allowed to use a scraper to look what is written on a web page, to index it and then make it, let's say, retrievable and searchable in an AI product, for example. And this led more or less to the extinction of all startups that were dealing with, let's say, internet-based text information and crawling. So it's just a small flip for incumbents that killed an entire industry. Good.
I want to build on that, especially what Karin said earlier. I think it's difficult to pinpoint one specific law which hinders innovation. And I think that's not a big problem. We do have an issue with GDPR, with the enforcement of GDPR, as you rightfully said, because we have 27 enforcement agencies, national regulators, and we still have quite some insecurity in how this is enforced, especially in the various, in the different countries. I understand that European Union aspires to learn from that in the AI Act, but I think this is still to be seen. But the problem, I think, is not in specific laws. The problem is what it does to our brains again and the way we think, because we are not only working on, and we manage this, for example, in the company quite well so far, because in all big projects we have a process where we check whether it's GDPR compliant or not. It's established, we have a team, So this works, but we always have to work on the assumption that there might be a law which we still don't know, we don't understand, or if there is no law, maybe we still get some public backlash because we do something which is maybe legally okay, but maybe not perceived well. And this does something with your brains, because you're always thinking in kind of a defensive mode rather than trying to work, so to say, testing against the law. And I think this mindset is the bigger problem than one specific regulation.
Yeah, I call it the fundament of mental reservation. So it's 3-4 business people, and the rest is people helping either to facilitate a project or telling you why it's so complicated. And I think this is deep in unfortunately in our cultures, and we need to change this, because we are trained and educated like this. Not only the generative AI is trained, but we are trained to be, if it's red, you don't go. If it's this, you don't do da-da-da. No. So I think it's really relevant to get rid of this mental reservation, which is the fundament for very, very many business processes, We start with checklists instead of a vision and an idea. So you asked initially, what is the difference? We come with the checklists, what to look at, careful, this. But we should come with the idea, the vision, and open think what we want to do, what is our goal, what would we like to do. Then work on the idea and then try how to tackle all the hurdles or get over it and work with it, and not come with, okay, someone has an idea, means a lot of work, risk.
Speaking of lots of work and, let's say, the forefront of technology, the nice thing why we invited two representatives from consulting companies, and you also mentioned before, just now in the morning, you worked in consulting before, me as well. So welcome to the club.
So we need to...
That's the retirement plan. No, but very often it's the case. If you look, let's say, at the consulting waves of the last few decades, it was, let's say, it was always a combination of new methods, because you mentioned change management before, and the new tools that you use that were mainframes, let's say, better CRM tools and so on. Think of the BCG metrics, think of the balanced scorecard, think of the just-in-time or Toyota production system, best cost country sourcing, and so on and so on and so on. So there was always something very new that consulting companies were the first to bring into really production, at first the blue chip companies, and then trickle down. And this is now especially a question to you, Karin and Michael. How does AI end up for you on that scale? Is this, let's say, both a methodology and the technology, or is it a totally entirely different beast, or how would you rate it?
You said it's a methodology, and generative AI is more than technology. Methodology, or the methodologies you named, were pretty much seen for large enterprises, not so much in the smaller ones, which are the backbone, especially of most industries. So the blue chips or the huge industries are not located, just looking at Austria, in Austria. So the backbone of this caterpillar is not the large industries, but it's the SMEs, the small, medium enterprises. And they did not use it, and usually these methodologies did refer to specific industries to a certain point, and on the other hand, on certain questions, on efficiency, on this and this and this. But this is not, and not talking about generative AI, it's definitely true for all industries. It's holistic. Everyone can use it, and it's not this like exclusive, some strategic, the solution for the one question, but it's a very different approach now, and especially when we talked previously about ChatGPT, it's now like a consumer good, and also the speed. Nobody cares now if I can write a great slide deck. By the way, I cannot use PowerPoint, although I'm very long in the industry, and it is good. And I said I waited for generative AI because now I can do it. So yeah, I never learned it. I moved from the industry into consulting, and I said I'm not gonna learn it. I said you will learn it. No, I never learned it, but I knew that no. But yes, it definitely changed everything. Yeah, and everyone can use it, also small enterprises. And we see that these small enterprises are much more agile when using it, because they don't think so much about the regulation and the problems so much. So I think if small enterprises use this, it can be definitely a comparative advantage if they can understand the ease of access and execution, and they maybe don't have to think about so many rules and regulations as we have to do, maybe.
Well, first and foremost, it's a great, fantastic source of growth for consulting. So, in the simple Austrian example, we started 6 years ago with actually 2 data and AI consultants. The team is now 200 and growing. It's the fastest growing team and the fastest growing business unit. And we had it in the panel before. You said there is a big gap between business and IT. And actually, the gap is growing bigger. The good news is the gap is filled with consulting. So that's more or less our business.
And so not sure I agree, this is good news.
So Tom, please sign here. No, all good. So that's, I think, the biggest impact of all. So if you think of a typical data project, and you mentioned that as well, when we do, actually we have, even in Austria, we have started 2 large data-driven transformations. And on a typical data project, you think about, oh my God, a lot of data scientists. No. I have, at a typical project size of 10 people, I would have 1 data scientist and roughly 2 to 3 business consultants, and then 5 to 6 people only caring about preparing and sort of digesting, transferring data. So, and it's very basic and simple work, work to make the data accessible, to transform it into the right way, to ensure that there's proper data organization, that the data is handled, and so on. So, a data project means a lot of work, but not only for data scientists, and it's great for consulting. And of course, it will change our industry as well, but I mean, actually, I'm not afraid. We are working with concepts that are actually more than 150 years old. So just think about file systems and how much time we are spending actually with wasteless administrative tasks like storing files in a folder. I mean, think about it. The concept is, I don't know, 200 years old, putting something in a folder. Is this really the way we should work today? I mean, come on. We're 2023. It's not possible that we are working in that way anymore. And of course, we need to be more efficient. We need to stop, copying from text from an email to a PowerPoint document, from a spreadsheet to PowerPoint, and the other way around. That's ridiculous waste of time. And I'm so glad that AI will help us in doing that damn administrative work so much more efficient, so much faster, and I'm at the next decade is a bright decade for consulting and for those who work in consulting, because our life will be significantly easier.
Yeah, thanks. This is. I think no one can accuse you of not being honest. No, but I mean, this is hitting actually very close to the home base, because yesterday was, let's say, the parents' evening. First time my son is now in middle school. And I talked with the teacher that is in charge of digital education. And I asked him, what are they learning at the moment? And the teacher told me, they just got their Windows PCs. So that's good. And they learn, I kid you not, how to put files in a folder, to give the folder a name and share the link on Microsoft Teams. And I was like, what? You learned this in school? Why do we even need a school for that? But this is just the excursus. I think you wanted to add something.
No, I liked your openness, Michael. Yeah, so I will try also to go in that direction. So I think I've seen a situation that I'm also simplifying here in the last couple of years, where enterprise organizations innovating and driving adoption of new technology despite what is happening in governments or in public institutions. So it feels a little bit completely decoupled. Yeah. Yes, of course, regulation, like sometimes really a barrier, but I think AI is in that sense different, that we really need to think who is really thinking about the right framework condition for making this possible in Austria, yeah, because it's all about speed, it's all about adoption. And I'm not talking as Microsoft representative, but we really need to make sure that we have the right climate, the right funding, the right incentive systems, that companies are able to adopt this new technology. And I can give you one example. So far, it's not, and we know that cloud is super important for AI. It's more or less, in SME, it's the basis. Yeah? We are not able to fund cloud technology in Austria in the majority of cases. We are still funding hardware. So I think we need to talk about framework conditions. We need to talk about how can we bring regulation down, complexity down. How can we get more agility, like you said. Yeah? This is super, super important. And this, having this sort of uncoupled situation, this is the enterprise space and this is the regulatory / public space. I think this is not a good concept going forward, but I do not see a lot of guys taking over responsibility for digitalization. Yeah, as I've mentioned before, I do not see that digitalization these times is really playing a major role in forward-looking programs of political parties, yeah, across all parties. So I think we need to change that one. We need to change how we are thinking about digitalization and AI in general, that this is really a big opportunity and not a big threat.
Yeah, fully agree. You know, this is why we founded the NGO in the first place.
And I think especially in these times where many companies suffering from the recession, they tend to also cut their budgets on IT expenses. So, and if the budgets are going down, especially when looking on infrastructure, so what is the fundament? And you know, the CEOs are keen to speak about generative AI or technology. First of all, you need to have the data in a cloud. But many corporates don't have the data in the cloud, and I'm speaking about key data. And if the data is not in the cloud because the cloud is bad, which is the rumor, still is the rumor, or a major risk, then it's very difficult, you know, to do the next step. So I think, first of all, before talking about, I think, what is the bright future of for the consulting, I think it's important also to educate in regard to eminence building what is really needed, not on a consumer perspective, but on an enterprise perspective, to go on AI or generative AI next level status, so to say. So you need to bring the data into the cloud. You need to, here you really need to focus on the security, not only in the cloud, but also in regard to application. And then you should make a fast progress. But there is a lot of data not in the cloud yet. So this is something where I think there is the vision. But even large corporates, lots of essential databases are not transformed to the cloud yet. This is my point of view. So it's essential to start with this.
Yeah, I totally subscribe to that view with the decoupling and the cloud, because in Austria, let's say in Europe, you don't have a cloud discussion. You have a data space discussion. If you tell this to someone in China or Japan, they will say, you're talking about what? It's about cloud infrastructure. The same is true if you talk about training AI models, it's about GPUs. Here you have a high-performance computing discussion. In 99 out of 100 cases, HPCs are just totally not suitable for these AI workloads. But yeah, in order to avoid that, I hug the microphone all the time before we go to the Slido questions. Are there some questions from the audience? Yes, it's nice in one line. So where is the mic?
So, yes, thanks for the great discussion here. So I want to make a short comment, because I think we started this day in the morning where we did a comparison between North America or other continents and Europe. And what I always see here in Europe, we start already our discussions about the regulations and not about the innovations. And I think we should turn it around, so to say, okay, when we would be the driver in the boat and the pilot, then it would be good first to start, okay, what is next? What what are the innovations, and then of course we need to think about the risks as well. What are the risks? There are a lot of risks in the AI space, but I think we need to turn around a little bit and first think what is next, what is the future, and then of course take the awareness, what are the risks, and take the regulations, but not start the discussions about how we need to regulate something that we didn't invent so far. And I think this is something I would like to see in future. Thank you.
Yeah, hi, thanks for the panel. And the beginning was like about biggest misses and expectations. I wanted to ask the question, what are the future plans or perspectives that those companies now being represented on the panel doing in the future together, some combined policy work in Brussels to avert certain things? When we learned about the copyright directive, I mean, nobody showed up from the business side on that. That was basically just civil society being against it. There was Oettinger, which cost like Europe as a commissioner probably more than the whole Greece cost us on damage for an economy. And so the only thing I can ask, how is the future policy work combined from Austria towards Brussels to avert certain like limitations on the policy side, so we don't have in 10 years the next discussion how bad the situation is because somebody was like over-regulating something. Thank you.
Do you address this, let's say, on the individual companies, or is this on the level of Austria as such?
It's on the level of individual companies as Austria as such, and also like from associations. I mean, that's like they only show up for like their own specific niche demands in policy work, but nobody thinks like 2 years ahead or like just across out their own domain.
Maybe, I think it's not an answer, but I will try. Yeah. So I do have a slide, and on the slide is a quadrant. Yeah, and this quadrant has, of course, 4 corners. And on the first corner, there are the technicians, the technical guys sitting. Yeah. On the other corners are the commercial guys sitting. They are just discussing business case, ROI, margin, all these things. And then you have the legislative guys, the lawyers down there. And on the right side, there are I call it the esoterical guys or ethical guys discussing things. Yeah. The tricky thing is when everybody stays at the corner and is going just for 100% safety or regulation, or technical guys are just saying, I'm doing everything which is technical possible. Yeah. Or guys saying, I'm going only to maximize my margin, my business. We have a very, very tricky discussion, and we've seen that also in the cloud discussion. So I think everybody needs to move. Yeah, everybody needs to understand the point of view. We've seen different perspectives today in the keynote. Yeah, everybody's approaching the AI topic from a different angle. I think we need to talk, we need to sit together, and we need to find some sort of trade-offs between the different point of views.
To be honest, I want to fully agree with your statement. And for us as a business, and we are a large business in Austrian terms, but we are a small cap in international terms. The amount of regulation which is already active, which is just in the process, and which is discussed at an early stage, is just overwhelming, even for us as a large corporation in Austrian terms, with quite a few people in the company, you know, in our legal department, in our regulatory affairs department, in our public affairs department. So really, and I have this every quarter when we discuss our strategy with regards to regulation and where to focus on, you have to put your bets, and the bets you typically put more in the short term, and the bets you typically put closer to your core business. And I agree, it's a systematic challenge because there's the complexity of the regulation, the complexity of the legislative process, the complexity, the number of stakeholders being involved, especially in Brussels, is just overwhelming, to be very frank.
And coming from the advisory business now, of course, you really try to talk to, we call them policymakers, what will be the impact of this and this law. So we are definitely not included when they generate or talk about this legislation. But on the other hand, when drafts come out, no matter if it's on anti-money laundering, supply chain act, you name it, then a draft is out, and then we think about it, and they say, okay, how should this be done, like the reality check? But we just can comment on this. So you have in Austria, you know, they have, in a democratic system, all the governments change frequently, the ministers change frequently, the offices change frequently, and the same is true for Europe. So I'm not complaining, but we of course try to address the practicability test, so to say. But you must not influence from I would say advisory side, because otherwise they would say we go here and try to influence. We just can discuss with them why we think maybe a reconsideration might be a good option. So we need to be cautious when advising or on regulations. But most of the people in the advisory business think would share my opinion that there is too many regulations, too complex regulations, because people are also within our corporate tired on working on internal and external regulations, because you know, every day there is a new regulation out, which is adopted differently in each and every European country, mostly, and timing. So different timing, different adoption, different regulators' view. So we cannot influence as much as someone may think.
And I want to add one point here. Especially in the last years, in Europe and in Austria, policymakers have become very hesitant to listen to companies. That's just a fact, and I think it's not a good development, right? And this is a real difference to, for example, what you have in the States. I could name you easily in Austria alone 5 to 10 well-known politicians who in principle just don't talk to companies. And I just don't understand it, because having a conversation and a discussion, this is, to be frank, this is not illegal. Yeah? I think it's just listening to concerns or developments, what is happening in real life, and I think that's a bad development.
Just a final short point, but I would like to start actually one step earlier and delegate the responsibility back to the voters. It shouldn't be the task of enterprises to fight against regulation that is potentially reducing our wealth. It should be in the interest of the population to vote for parties that are regulating in a way that doesn't reduce our wealth as a continent. So the delegation, the responsibility goes to everybody in the room to go for parties that are, you know, tech-friendly, that are helping us to thrive as economies and in Europe. And it shouldn't be companies fighting against politicians for wrong policies.
I think also giving back accountability to companies would be really a nice thing, because I think regulation is a good thing. I think we need to agree on basic rules as a society, because it's definitely a new territory for all of us. But the idea of regulating these things down on desk level, is for me is ridiculous, because if you're in tech, you see how fast these things are moving. This Copilot I've just showed you will be commodity in 6 months. So how can you regulate these things? You can only influence also citizens and corporations that they are doing, that they are going for ethical standards, that they're not using this technology in some spaces like HR or whatever. We should go for these ground rules as a society and not regulating deep down where SMEs are really dying because of administrative work.
I like that very much. It's a very positive end note to the whole thing.
Maybe also one idea. Think about a company that is misusing AI. Think about Microsoft misusing AI. Think about a bank misusing AI. What that means for the company. If this becomes visible, they might be out of business immediately. Stock price going down like hell, consumers pushing back. So I think it's also time to give back responsibility.
It's like the self-regulation of the market. This is the prime example. Famous last words on a positive note.
Yes, famous last words. So first of all, thank you very much, Monika and Clemens, for inviting me. And the positive note is that I'm thrilled that there is also lots of females in the audience and professors. You gave great speeches, but I would really appreciate for the next conference that there is also a couple of more female speakers and not only brilliant panelists. Speaking about you, female panelists, because why? This conference speaks about the economy, and it's no female thing. But we heard about talent and urge of talent, so we should not leave out, especially at these conferences, the visibility of smart women, especially young, smart women. They should not be scared to work on this, but be open. And, you know, to be open, they need to be visible also here. So, positive statement. Hello, ladies. Great to see you all here. Yeah, and next time maybe also as speakers.
There could be no better way to say this will not be a one-time event. So, thank you very much for pre-announcing the lineup.
And you know, we will support it again.
Sure. There are enough lawyers here, so this is now a contract according to Austrian law. Thank you very much.
So I would like to invite Monika and Clemens for a last round of applause. Thank you so much. You were wonderful hosts. In preparation for this, I asked ChatGPT to write me some jokes, and it came up with a lot of jokes, and they were all not very good. But one I want to tell you. What's the difference between ChatGPT and a comedian? The comedian knows when to stop. And so do we. And I wish you a pleasant lunch and way more interesting discussions. Continue those interesting discussions. And I hand over to you for some closing words.
Ladies first.
Ladies first, yes. Karin, yes. Point taken very much. And I think it's actually very important also in terms of AI, because one of the things we also discuss is the fact that too little focus is put on females when training those models, and it actually might have profound impact on how the models would develop. So I think that's a very, very smart point, and I will do a better job next time. Thank you.
This is just iterative now, but also thanks a lot for showing up and for the 7 billion people joining via YouTube. To quote the famous Sepp Blatter. No, really, thanks a lot. I also saw that lots of you subscribed to the newsletter and so on, so don't worry, we don't bombard you with let's say, sales stuff, which would be illegal according to the GDPR anyway. No, but rather, yeah, stay tuned. We will definitely make another event. I don't think we will wait for a year, especially with the upcoming EU elections. Might be a very good one. And especially thanks a lot to the international guests that came here, because, you know, it's not so... Nowadays, with online events and so on, it has become quite difficult to get high-profile speakers. Also, thanks a lot for joining, and also joining later the buffet. So, thank you.